If you're enjoying this video, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. Share it with your friends and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Every like and subscribe helps the channel grow.
The sound came first. A voice that shouldn't be there. My wife's voice. But Eleanor has been dead for 3 years. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, from that morning in Blackwater Canyon when everything was still normal. Or, at least, what passed for normal in my life back then. My name is Mason Fitzgerald, and I've been a ranger at Blackwater Canyon for almost 7 years now. The morning it all began was odd from the start. I remember stepping onto my cabin porch just as the sun was coming up, coffee mug in hand, and noticing something strange. Silence. Complete silence. Anyone who's spent time in a forest knows that's not right. Mornings should be noisy with birds, singing, insects buzzing, the whole world waking up. But that day, nothing. Just the soft gurgle of the stream down in the canyon. "Something's wrong, Duke," I said to my German shepherd who stood alert at my side, ears perked forward. Duke had been with me since I returned from Korea, where I'd served as a field medic. He knew my moods better than any person alive, and I knew his. Right now, his stiff posture told me he felt it too. Something wasn't right. I sipped my coffee and watched the mist drift through the ancient hemlocks. Blackwater Canyon is old, really old. Some of these trees were here before America, was even a country. They tower over everything, making you feel tiny when you walk beneath them. The moss-covered rocks and fallen logs give the whole place this ancient feeling, like you're walking through a world that time forgot. That morning, with the red and gold autumn leaves making a bright ceiling above and the sunlight breaking through. In patches, it should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt like the forest was holding its breath. I finished my coffee, grabbed my gear, and headed out for my morning patrol. Duke trotted beside me, sticking closer than usual. "Mason to base, starting North Route Patrol," I said into my radio as we headed down the trail. The radio crackled with static before a voice came through. "Base to Mason, copy that. Hey, keep an eye out in the north sector. We've had reports of unusual animal activity up there." "What kind of unusual?" I asked, ducking under a low-hanging branch. "Deer running in panic, smaller animals going missing. Could be a bear, but behavior doesn't match. Just be careful." "Always am," I replied, though that wasn't entirely true. My supervisor had been on my case lately about taking too many risks, especially with my night patrols. But the darkness and solitude of the forest at night brought me peace that I couldn't find anywhere else. As we walked deeper into the canyon, I noticed deer tracks in the soft dirt of the path, but something was off about them. They veered suddenly, sharp turns and jumps that didn't make sense. It was like the deer had been startled by something, changed direction in a panic. Duke noticed too. He sniffed the tracks, then looked up at me with concerned eyes. "I know, buddy." "Not normal," I said, patting his head. The trail wound deeper into the canyon, taking us into a grove of old-growth trees that had somehow escaped the loggers' saws over the centuries. The canopy grew thicker here and the temperature dropped noticeably. I zipped up my jacket, surprised by the sudden chill. That's when I caught the smell. Faint, but unmistakable. Like wet fur mixed with something rotten. I wrinkled my nose in disgust. "You smell that?" I asked Duke, who was now sniffing the air with intensity. Then I noticed something else strange. The trees had stopped swaying. Not a branch moved, not a leaf rustled. The whole forest seemed frozen, as if it was holding its breath, waiting for something. A hawk screamed somewhere in the distance, the sound sharp and sudden in the unnatural quiet. I nearly jumped out of my skin. "Get a grip, Mason," I muttered. To myself, adjusting the worn photograph of Eleanor that I always kept in my breast pocket. A habit that brought me comfort, touching the edge of that photo, making sure it was still there. I clicked my radio again. Mason to base, anything new on those animal reports? Nothing but static came back. I frowned, checking the device. We should have had clear reception in this area. That's when Duke stopped walking. His body went rigid, hackles rising along his back, and the forest seemed to whisper my name. I stood frozen, my heart beating fast. Eleanor's voice. I'd know it anywhere. Mason, help me. It came from somewhere deep in the trees. Duke growled louder, looking at the same spot where the voice seemed to be coming from. Eleanor? I whispered, even though I knew it couldn't be her. I'd held her hand at the hospital. I'd watched her take her last breath after the car crash. I'd buried her 3 years ago. My hand moved to my face, fingers tracing the long scar that runs from my temple to my jaw. A reminder of Korea, of the day I almost died. Eleanor used to touch that scar gently when I'd wake up screaming from nightmares. But after she died, the war dreams stopped. Instead, I started dreaming about being watched in the forest. Duke barked sharply, snapping me back to reality. It's not her, Duke, I said, my voice shaking. It can't be her. I unclipped the flashlight from my belt even though it was daytime. Something about having it in my hand made me feel safer. My boss keeps telling me I should carry a gun, especially with all the strange things happening in the park lately. But after what I saw in the war, I swore I'd never carry a weapon again. Let's keep moving, I told Duke. I needed to focus on my job. I'm good at my job. Everyone says so. I know every plant and animal in this forest. I can name every tree, every bird call, every animal track. But lately, I'd been seeing tracks I couldn't identify. As we walked further up the trail, I pulled out my small notebook. For months, I'd been writing down all the weird things I'd noticed in the park. Deer moving in strange patterns, birds going quiet at the wrong times, tracks that didn't match any animal I knew. My boss thinks I'm becoming obsessed. He even suggested I retire or transfer to a busier park. You need to be around people more, Mason, he'd said last week. It's not healthy, all these night patrols, all this time alone. But I don't want to leave Blackwater Canyon. It's become my home since Eleanor died. Our home was too full of memories. I couldn't stay there without her. Duke suddenly stopped again. This time, he wasn't growling. He was staring at something ahead on the trail. I followed his gaze and saw 3 crows sitting on a low branch. They were oddly still, all facing us. As we watched, they suddenly took off, flying in panicked circles before racing away like something was chasing them. But there was nothing there. That's going in the notebook, I muttered, writing it down quickly. Then Duke did something that sent a chill down my spine. He whimpered, a scared sound I'd never heard him make before, and backed up against my legs. Duke is brave. He's always been brave. During thunderstorms, during encounters with bears, during anything, he's never shown fear, until now. What is it, boy? I whispered, kneeling beside him. His eyes were fixed on something in the thick bushes beside the trail. I stared hard but couldn't see anything unusual. I checked my watch. 10:17 a.m. I tried the radio again. Mason to base, checking in from North Sector Trail. Nothing but static. I frowned and tapped the radio. The battery was full and this wasn't a dead zone. Something was interfering with the signal. Then I noticed my watch had stopped. The second hand wasn't moving. Still 10:17 a.m. I looked back toward the bushes Duke was watching. The air felt colder there, much colder than it should be on an autumn day. My breath came out in a white cloud like it was winter. Come on, I said to Duke, tugging gently on his leash. Let's check it out. He resisted, planting his feet firmly. Duke has never refused to follow me anywhere, until now. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward alone, pushing aside the branches of the thick bush. What I found on the other side made my blood run cold. A deer lay on the ground, but not in any natural way. Its body was twisted, bent in angles that should be impossible. And its middle was empty, like something had removed all its organs with careful, precise cuts. In the soft mud around the deer's body were footprints. Huge footprints about 18 inches long, but they weren't bear tracks. They had 5 long toes, almost like a human's foot, but much, much bigger. Been a ranger for 7 years. I served in Korea before that. I've seen a lot of terrible things in my life, but nothing like this. I backed away slowly, feeling eyes on me from somewhere in the forest, watching, waiting. That's when I noticed something else that didn't belong. Half hidden under some fallen leaves was a backpack. A hiker's backpack. I recognized it immediately. It belonged to Timothy Welsh, a hiker reported missing 3 days ago. We'd been searching for him with no luck, until now. With shaking hands, I picked up the backpack. Everything was still inside. Water bottle, trail mix, map, compass. Everything. Except Tim Welsh. His journal was there too. I opened it to the last entry, dated 3 days ago. The final words sent ice through my veins. It's mimicking human voices. As I read those words, the forest went completely still again. Even the stream seemed to stop gurgling. In that perfect silence, I heard Eleanor's voice again, closer this time. "Mason, I'm cold. So cold. Please help me, Mason." And this time I saw movement between the trees. I dropped the journal and grabbed Duke's collar. Something was moving between the trees, something big. "Hello," I called out, my voice shakier than I wanted it to be. "Park Ranger, identify yourself." The movement stopped. Then came a loud crack, like a tree branch snapping but much bigger. Duke barked wildly, pulling against my grip. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a shadow, a trick of light through the trees. But shadows don't move on their own. Shadows don't stand over 10 feet tall. It stepped into a patch of sunlight, and I felt my legs go weak. The creature was thin, so thin its ribs stuck out sharply. But it was tall, taller than any man I'd ever seen. Its arms hung down past its knees, ending in long fingers with sharp points like knives. Its skin was pulled tight over its bones, gray-white like old snow. But its head was the worst part. 2 huge antlers grew from its skull, branching out like a massive deer's. Its face was stretched and wrong, with a mouth too wide, lined with teeth that looked sharp as razors. Its eyes were black holes that seemed to pull you in. "Not real," I whispered to myself. "Not real." But Duke could see it too. He lunged forward, breaking free from my grip. "Duke, no," I screamed, but it was too late. My brave dog charged at the monster, barking and snarling. The creature didn't even seem concerned. It just swung one of those long arms, catching Duke mid-leap and sending him flying into a tree trunk. Duke yelped, in pain, and crumpled to the ground. I wanted to run to him, but my feet wouldn't move. I was frozen, staring at this impossible thing that couldn't exist. Then it spoke. "Mason, help me. I'm cold, Mason. So cold." Eleanor's voice, perfect in every way, coming from that monster's mouth. My stomach turned. This thing had stolen my wife's voice, was using it like a tool, like bait. Anger cut through my fear. "That's not your voice," I said, my hands balling into fists. "Don't you dare use her voice." The creature tilted its head like it was curious. Then it smiled. A terrible wide smile that split its face almost in half. "Please, Mason," it said. But now the voice was different. A man's voice. Probably Timothy Welsh. "Please help me. I'm lost." Then another voice, a woman's. "Is anyone there? My leg is broken." And another, and another. Voices pouring out of the creature, overlapping, begging for help. All the missing. Hikers from over the years, I realized. All of them inside this thing somehow. I'd heard stories from the old-timers who lived in the small towns around the canyon. Stories about something that lived deep in the forest. Something that could mimic. Voices to lure people in. Something that was always hungry but could never be filled. I'd never believed those stories. Until now. The air around the creature was so cold I could see my breath. Ice was forming on the ground beneath its feet, spreading outward like a frozen puddle. I backed away slowly. Duke was still on the ground, moving a little but hurt. I needed to get to him, needed to get both of us away from here. The creature moved suddenly, so fast I almost didn't see it. 1 second it was 30 feet away, the next it was behind a tree just 10 feet from me. It shouldn't have been able to move that quick. Nothing that big should move that fast. "What are you?" I whispered. It didn't answer with words. Instead, I felt something, a hunger so deep and terrible it made my knees shake. This thing was starving, had been starving for hundreds of years, and nothing would ever fill it up. I knew what it was now. The old Cherokee and Shawnee stories called it a Wendigo, a spirit of hunger and winter, a person who had once eaten human flesh and been cursed to always hunger for more. I didn't know if that's really what this was, but the name fit the monster in front of me. It moved again, disappearing from behind the tree and reappearing on a rock ledge above the trail. It was playing with me, showing me it could catch me any time it wanted. I had to do something. I had to get to Duke. Slowly, I crouched down, never taking my eyes off the creature. I reached for a large stick on the ground, a poor weapon, but better than nothing. The Wendigo watched me, its black eyes following every move. Ice crystals formed on the trees around it, like winter was spreading from its body. "You took the hikers," I said, trying to keep it distracted while I moved closer. To Duke. "You took Timothy Welsh." The creature's mouth opened wider than any mouth should, and Timothy's voice came out, "It found me on the North Ridge. I tried to run." Then Eleanor's voice again, "Mason, why won't you help me?" That was it. Something snapped inside me. "Stop using her voice!" I shouted, my words echoing through the silent forest. The Wendigo moved again, this time appearing right in front of me, so close I could smell its awful breath, like frozen meat gone bad. I fell backward, landing hard on the ground. It leaned down over me, those antlers making it seem even taller. Its long fingers reached for my face, ice forming in the air around them. This was it. I was going to die. Then Duke, my brave, loyal Duke, somehow found the strength to get up. With a growl, he threw himself at the creature's leg, biting down hard. The Wendigo made a sound, a high, terrible shriek that hurt my ears. It kicked out, sending Duke rolling again, but that moment was all I needed. I scrambled to my feet and ran to Duke, scooping him up in my arms. He was heavy, but fear gave me strength. Then I ran faster than I'd ever run in my life. Behind me, the Wendigo shrieked again. I didn't look back. I just ran, holding Duke tight against my chest, feeling his warm blood soaking into my jacket. "Stay with me, buddy," I gasped as I ran. "Stay with me." The forest blurred around me. I didn't stick to the trail. The creature would expect that. Instead, I crashed through underbrush, splashed through the icy stream, scrambled up rocky slopes. But no matter how fast I ran, I could feel it behind me, always just a few steps away. Not catching me, but hurting me, driving me in the direction it wanted me to go, deeper into the canyon, away from help, away from safety, into its territory. I ran until my lungs burned. Duke whimpered in my arms, his breathing shallow. I needed to stop, to check his injuries, but I couldn't. Not with that thing behind us. The sun was getting lower in the sky. I'd been running for hours, changing direction, trying to lose the creature. But every time I thought I'd escaped, I'd catch a glimpse of it, watching from behind a tree or perched on a rock above. It was toying with me. Like a cat with a mouse, my foot caught on a root and I fell hard, Duke tumbling from my arms. I scrambled to him, checking to make sure he was still alive. His side was matted with blood, but he was breathing. "I'm sorry, buddy," I whispered, gently touching his head. "I'm so sorry." That's when I spotted it. The old fire tower. It stood on a ridge about 100 yards away, its metal frame rusty and weathered. It had been abandoned for years, but the structure was still solid. Shelter. And high ground. I carefully picked Duke up again and pushed forward, my tired legs protesting with each step. The tower seemed to get further away instead of closer, but finally I reached the bottom of the metal stairs. I looked back. The forest was still. No sign of the Wendigo, but I could feel it watching. With Duke cradled in one arm, I climbed the zigzagging metal stairs, each step clanging loudly in the quiet forest. At the top was a small room with windows on all sides, the lookout post where rangers once watched for forest fires. The door was locked, but the wood around the handle was rotted. One good kick and it splintered open. Inside, the small room was dusty but intact. Old equipment was scattered around: a desk, some chairs, a two-way radio that probably hadn't worked in a decade, emergency supplies in a metal trunk. I gently laid Duke on the floor and barricaded the door with the desk. Then I checked all the windows, making sure they were shut tight. Only then did I allow myself to really look at Duke's wounds. The Wendigo had caught him with those terrible claws, leaving deep cuts along his side. But they weren't as bad as I'd feared. With shaking hands, I found an old first aid kit in the supplies and cleaned his wounds as best I could. "You'll be okay," I told him, though I wasn't sure if I was trying to convince him or myself. Duke licked my hand weakly. Night was falling fast now. The forest below was growing dark. I tried the old radio, but it was dead, just as I'd expected. My own radio was still picking up nothing but static. We were alone. Me and Duke and the monster. I searched through the supplies, looking for anything that might help us. In the trunk, I found some emergency flares, matches, an old blanket, and a small propane heater. I wrapped Duke in the blanket and turned, my attention to the flares. Weapons. I needed weapons. The old stories about Wendigos came back to me. Stories I'd heard from the local people. They said Wendigos feared two things: fire and cold iron. The flares would give me fire, but iron? I looked around the tower room desperately. The frame of the tower itself was iron, and there, in the corner, was an old iron poker, probably, used for a stove that was no longer there. I grabbed it, testing its weight in my hand. It wasn't much, but it was something. Outside, the temperature was dropping fast. Too fast for a normal autumn night. My breath fogged in the air inside the tower room. "It's coming," I whispered to Duke. As if in answer, I heard a sound from below. Metal groaning. Something was climbing the tower. I rushed to the windows, peering out into the darkness. At first, I saw nothing. Then, a movement on the stairs, a tall, thin shape climbing with unnatural speed. The whole tower shuddered. It wasn't built to hold something that big. I grabbed a flare and the iron poker, my heart hammering so hard I could barely breathe. Duke tried to stand, but he was too weak. He growled low in his throat, eyes fixed on the door. Then came the voices, dozens of them, calling from outside the tower. "Help us! Please, I'm hurt. Mason, it's so cold out here. Let me in." Eleanor's voice mixed with the others, pleading. I pressed my hands over my ears, but I could still hear them. The tower shook again. The creature was getting closer. I struck the flare against the floor. It sparked to life, filling the small room with bright red light. The voices outside seemed to hiss and draw back at the sudden brightness. The door rattled. Something huge pressed against it. The desk I'd used as a barricade slid an inch across the floor. "Stay back," I shouted, though I knew it wouldn't listen. The temperature dropped even more. Ice crystals formed on the windows, spreading like frost fingers. The door burst open, the desk flying across the room. And there it stood. The Wendigo, its antlered head nearly touching the ceiling of the small room, its black eyes reflecting the red flare light. "You can't have her voice," I said, holding the flare in front of me like a shield. "You can't have any of them." The creature's mouth opened in that terrible smile. From inside came Eleanor's voice once more. "Mason, why did you let me die?" Something inside me broke. With a scream of rage and grief, I lunged forward, jabbing the flare toward the monster's face. It jerked back, shrieking. A sound like ice cracking and animals dying all at once. The Wendigo's long arm swept out, catching me across the chest and sending me flying into the wall. The air rushed from my lungs. The flare rolled across the floor, still burning. The creature advanced on me, ice spreading across the floor beneath its feet. Its clawed fingers reached for me, so cold they seemed to freeze the air around them. I scrambled for the iron poker, my fingers closing around it just as those terrible hands grabbed my jacket. The cold bit through to my skin immediately, like being plunged into a frozen lake. With my last strength, I swung the iron poker. It connected with the Wendigo's arm with a sound like sizzling meat. The creature shrieked again, releasing me. Where the iron had touched it, the gray skin smoked and bubbled. I swung again, aiming for its face, but it was too fast. It caught the poker in one hand, even as the iron burned it. With a twist, it wrenched the weapon from my grasp, sending it clattering across the floor. I was defenseless now. The Wendigo loomed over me, frost forming on my clothes just from being near it. Its hunger washed over me in waves, a bottomless need that could never be satisfied. This was it. I closed my eyes, thinking of Eleanor, wondering if I'd see her soon. Then I heard a growl. Duke, my loyal, brave Duke, had somehow found the strength to stand. He wobbled on his feet, but his eyes were fierce. Before I could stop him, he launched himself at the Wendigo one last time, his teeth sinking into its leg. The creature howled, reaching down to grab him. In that moment of distraction, I lunged for the flare on the floor. My fingers closed around it. The Wendigo had Duke now, lifting him up. My dog yelped in pain as those freezing hands gripped him. "No!" I screamed and thrust the flare directly into the Wendigo's chest. The effect was immediate and terrifying. The creature's entire body seemed to catch fire from within, glowing like hot coal. It dropped Duke and staggered backward, its mouth open in a silent scream. The tower room filled with blinding light. I shielded my eyes with my arm, feeling the heat wash over me. When I looked again, the Wendigo was gone. The doorway was empty. Outside, the night was still, but the cold remained. My left arm, where the creature had grabbed me, was white with frost. I couldn't feel it anymore. And Duke! I crawled to where he lay on the floor. His eyes were open, looking at me. He tried to wag his tail just once. "Good boy," I whispered, tears freezing on my cheeks. "The best boy." His chest rose and fell one last time, and then he was gone. I don't remember much after that. Park Rescue found me 2 days later, still in the tower, holding Duke's body. My left arm was black with frostbite. They had to take it at the elbow. No one believed my story, of course. They said I got lost, that the cold and fear made me hallucinate, that Duke was killed by a bear or mountain lion. They said the missing hikers probably just got lost too, or had accidents in the dangerous terrain. I know better. I quit the Park Service after that, moved to a small apartment in town, but I still watch the canyon, especially in autumn when the leaves turn red and gold, because I know it's still out there, the Wendigo. Wounded, maybe, but not dead. Never dead. Sometimes on cold nights I hear Eleanor's voice calling from the trees, but I don't answer anymore. And sometimes, when the wind is just right, I think I hear Duke barking, warning me to stay away. I always listen to him now. I still hear them in my dreams, the whispers in the static, the howls that freeze your blood. Sometimes I wake up screaming, my sheets soaked with sweat even though my room feels like an icebox. Nobody believes what happened to me at Frost Hollow Observatory, but I was there. I saw it. And now I need to warn you. Part 1. Setting the Scene. The day everything started was the quietest day I've ever known. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring because they're searching for any sound at all. I stepped outside my little ranger cabin that morning, and the snow crunched under my boots like breaking bones. I'm a park ranger at Frost Hollow Observatory in Wyoming. Well, I was. Now I don't know what I am anymore. That morning, the temperature gauge read 15 degrees, way too cold for early winter. The weather people had promised mild conditions, but they were dead wrong. The mountains around me were covered in snow, with dark pine trees sticking up like soldiers standing guard. I needed to check my weather tools, so I walked across the clearing. Every step I took was the only sound for miles. The frozen lake below me looked like a giant mirror, perfectly still. Smoke from my chimney went straight up to the sky. Not even a tiny breeze to push it. I noticed something strange right away. Animal tracks were everywhere. Deer, rabbits, foxes, but they all stayed far away from the eastern forest edge, like they knew something I didn't. The frost on the trees wasn't right either. Instead of the normal ice crystals you'd expect, these formed perfect geometric patterns. Triangles, squares, and straight lines. Nature doesn't work that way. At the edge of my area sat an old abandoned research station from the 1950s. Half buried in snow, its broken windows looked like empty eye sockets. My boss warned me about that place my first day here. "Leave it alone," he said. "Nothing there but old junk and bad memories." I should have listened to him. As I turned to go back inside, my left leg ached where flesh met metal. The cold always made my prosthetic leg hurt worse. I lost my real one years ago before I came to this frozen nowhere. Something moved at the edge of my vision. I spun around but saw nothing, just endless white and the dark smudge of the forest. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I didn't know it then, but that quiet, perfect morning was the beginning of the end. And the thing in the woods? It was already hunting me. I wasn't always a ranger in the middle of nowhere. 3 years ago, I worked for NASA as a communications specialist. My job was to listen to signals from space and make sure astronauts could talk to people on Earth. I was good at it too. But then the budget cuts came. My department got shut down, and suddenly I had no job. With bills piling up and not many options, I applied to the Park Service. They needed someone who understood radio equipment to help lost hikers and people stuck in snowstorms. That's how I ended up at Frost Hollow. My name is Darius Reynolds. I'm 39 years old with a dark complexion that stands out against all this snow. Most days I check weather equipment, patrol the trails, and make sure the communication systems work. I'm the only full-time ranger for 20 miles in any direction. The leg I mentioned, my left one, it's not real. I lost it in a training accident when I was in the military. Some days it works fine. Other days, especially when it's this cold, it feels like someone's driving nails into what's left of my knee. My boss, Ranger Wilson, gave me this posting because I'm good in emergencies. I don't panic. I think clearly when things go wrong. But he doesn't know about the nightmares that started 3 months ago when I first arrived. Every night, the same dream. Voices calling through static. Words I can't quite make out, but they sound urgent, scared, then a howl that doesn't sound like any animal I've ever heard. I keep a notebook where I write down weird radio frequencies and strange signals I pick up. There are a lot of them here, more than there should be. I've asked headquarters for better equipment to figure out what's causing them, but they always say no. The other rangers who visit sometimes think I'm going crazy. They see my pale face from working nights, monitoring those signals. They notice how I keep asking questions about the old research station. They exchange looks when they think I'm not watching. "Reynolds is getting cabin fever," they whisper. "Too much time alone up here." Maybe they're right. Maybe I am going crazy. But that doesn't explain what I found yesterday. I was checking the weather station when I picked up those whispers again on my radio. Not voices exactly, but something trying to sound like voices. They came through between the normal emergency channels, like someone, or something, was trying to find a way to talk. I followed the signal strength deeper into the woods. The temperature dropped with each step, even though I was moving away from the mountains into what should have been warmer ground. That's when I saw it. A perfectly preserved fox, frozen solid in the snow. Not curled up like animals do when they freeze to death. This one was mid-run, its legs stretched out, eyes wide open, like it had been flash frozen in an instant while running for its life. Reached out to touch it. The fur was colder than ice, colder than anything natural, and just for a second, I thought I saw its eyes move to look at me. I ran all the way back to my cabin. I locked the door. I told myself it was just a trick of the light, but deep down, I knew better. Something was wrong at Frost Hollow, and it was getting worse. After finding that frozen fox, I couldn't sleep. I kept the radio on all night listening. Around 3 a.m., the whispers came again. They slipped between normal channels like water finding cracks in a wall. I tried to record them, but when I played the tape back, there was nothing there. The next morning, I decided to check out the area where I found the fox. Daylight makes everything less scary, right? Wrong. What I found was worse. Much worse. 5. More animals. 2 rabbits, a deer, another fox, and an owl. All frozen mid-motion. The owl was caught in flight, its wings spread wide, eyes open in what looked like terror. They were arranged in a perfect circle, all facing inward like some kind of meeting that got interrupted. I took pictures with my Polaroid camera. Evidence. Proof I wasn't losing my mind. When I got back to the cabin, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely open the door. I put my camera down and went to make coffee. That's when I noticed my batteries. All of them. Flashlight, radio, even my watch, were dead. And not just dead. When I opened the flashlight, the batteries were frozen solid, with ice crystals growing inside them. That afternoon, I hiked up to where I could see the abandoned research station better. I didn't go inside, something told me not to, but I used my binoculars to look at it. The snow around the main door was disturbed. Fresh footprints led in, but none came out. No one had been up here in weeks besides me. On my way back, I found papers scattered through the forest. Bold, yellowed research documents from the 1950s. Most words were blacked out with thick marker, but I could make out phrases like thermal anomalies and frequency disruption. One page had a hand-drawn map of the area with the eastern ridge, circled in red. Things got stranger after that. The weather changed every few minutes. One moment, clear skies. The next, a snowstorm so thick I couldn't see 10 feet ahead. Then, just as quickly, back to clear again. I saw a patch of wildflowers growing in the middle of a snowbank. Perfect summer flowers surrounded by 3 feet of snow. When I touched them, they were warm, like they had their own little bubble of summer. But the animals were the scariest part. I watched a wolf walk right past a rabbit. Neither one ran. They both just stopped, turned their heads toward the eastern ridge, and stood still, like they were listening to something I couldn't hear. On my 4th night after finding the fox, I saw lights on the mountain. Not flashlights or campfires. These moved like fireflies, but bigger and with purpose. They zipped between peaks, stopped, then changed direction at perfect angles. No helicopter or plane moves like that. The next day, a hiker stumbled into my clearing. I rushed out to help, but stopped cold when I got close. He was frozen solid, standing upright. Eyes open wide, mouth in a silent scream. But here's the thing. His skin wasn't blue. No frostbite. No signs of hypothermia. Just perfectly preserved. Like he'd been flash frozen in an instant. I radioed it in. They told me to wait for the medical examiner. I waited by the body all day, watching it. As the sun went down, I swear I saw his eyes move, just a fraction, following something behind. Me. I spun around, and for just a second I thought I saw a tall figure at the edge of the woods. Then it was gone. When the medical team arrived the next day, they were baffled. "Never seen anything like it," the examiner said. "It's like he was frozen from the inside out." They took the body away. I never heard what they found. But that night, my radio picked up the hiker's voice calling for help, a voice that should have been impossible. That's when I knew I had to investigate the research station. Whatever was happening, the answers were in there. I would go the next morning. I didn't sleep that night. The whispers on the radio grew louder, and outside my window, something watched from the darkness. The morning I decided to check out the research station, something stopped me. A beeping from my heat detector. I use it to find hikers lost in snowstorms, but this time it was going crazy, pointing toward the mountains east of my cabin. The reading made no sense. It showed something giving off more heat than a human body, moving fast through the trees. Curious and scared at the same time, I grabbed my backpack, radio, and camera. I had to know what it was. I followed the signal for about 2 hours. It led me deep into a part of the forest I'd never patrolled before. The trees grew closer together here, blocking out most of the sunlight. The snow under my feet had a strange blue tint. My compass needle kept spinning, in circles, useless. The heat signature led to the mouth of a cave halfway up the mountainside. The entrance was small. I had to crouch to get in. My flashlight beam bounced off icy walls that sparkled like they were full of diamonds. "Hello?" I called. My voice echoed back, but different somehow. Deeper. Like the cave was changing the sound. I should have turned back. Everything inside me screamed to run. But I kept going. The tunnel widened into a large chamber. The air felt wrong. Parts were freezing cold. Other spots so warm I started sweating. My flashlight caught ice formations that didn't look natural, perfect cubes and pyramids of ice growing from the floor and ceiling. That's when I heard it. A low growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I swung my light toward the sound, and there it was. I still don't have words to properly describe what I saw. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, standing on 2 legs like a man, but everything else about it was wrong. Its body seemed to shift between solid and see-through. Its head was shaped like a wolf's, but too big, with teeth that looked like icicles. Its eyes reflected my flashlight like an animal's, but with intelligence behind them. Human intelligence. When it moved, it left trails in the air, like heat waves on hot pavement. The temperature around it changed wildly. I could see my breath 1 second, then was sweating the next. I was frozen in place, unable to move as it tilted its head, studying me. It raised what might have been a hand. A paw? And suddenly the air between us rippled. Then I was seeing double, triple. The cave multiplied around me, showing me the same space in different times. In one version, the cave was full of lab equipment. In another, it was completely frozen over. In a third, people in old-fashioned science coats were running from something I couldn't see. The creature howled, and the sound hit me like a physical force. I fell to my knees, dropping my flashlight. The light rolled, pointing at the wall where I saw hundreds of old photographs pinned up. Pictures of the research station, of experiments, of something growing in a tank. When I looked back, the creature had split into 3 smaller versions of itself, each one moving in perfect sync with the others. They circled me, curious rather than threatening. My watch went crazy. The hands, spinning backward and forward. 5 minutes passed in what felt like hours, or maybe hours passed in minutes. I couldn't tell anymore. The creatures came closer. One reached out and touched my radio. Instantly, it turned on, cycling through frequencies, faster than should be possible. It stopped on static, and through the white noise I heard words forming. Cold. Signal. Home. The voice wasn't human. It was like the static itself was learning to talk. I backed away slowly. The creatures watched but didn't follow as I stumbled to the cave entrance. Outside, the sun was setting. Impossible. I'd entered the cave in early morning. I ran all the way back to my cabin, my prosthetic leg screaming in pain. Inside, I locked the door and windows. I tried calling headquarters on the emergency line, but all I got was more static and that same voice, now louder, cold. Signal. Home. Coming. That night, every electronic device in my cabin turned on by itself. My TV showed only snow, but shapes moved in the static. My radio played garbled voices. Even my electric razor hummed to life. I realized the creatures, the dogmen, as I started calling them in my head, were trying to communicate. They were attracted to electronics, to signals. That's why they were at the research station. That's why they found me. But what did they want? And what did they mean by coming? I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Through my window, I saw them at the edge of the clearing. 3, then 5, then a dozen pairs of eyes reflecting the moonlight, watching, waiting. For what, I didn't know. But I had a feeling I'd find out soon enough. The next morning, I woke to the sound of wind howling. A blizzard had come out of nowhere. Snow piled against my windows and the temperature dropped so fast the glass cracked. I knew right away this wasn't a normal storm. The dogmen had made it. I had no choice now. I had to get to the research station, while I still could. The answers were there. I was sure of it. I bundled up in every layer I owned and forced my way through snow already waist deep. The wind cut like knives, and ice crystals formed on my eyelashes. My prosthetic leg went stiff, in the cold, making each step agony. It took me nearly 3 hours to reach the station, a trip that should have taken 40 minutes. The old building looked even worse up close. Windows broken, metal roof partially caved in. The door hung open, swinging in the wind. Inside, it was eerily calm. No wind. The air felt heavy, like being underwater. Dust covered old desks and equipment that looked straight out of an old sci-fi movie. Papers were everywhere, yellowed with age. I found the light switch out of habit and flipped it. Surprisingly, the lights came on, flickering and dim. The place had power. How was that possible after all these years? That's when I noticed the temperature. It was dropping fast. My breath clouded in front of me, thicker by the second. The walls began to frost over, ice spreading like living fingers across every surface. They were coming. I rushed through the station, grabbing any papers I could find. In what must have been the main lab, I found a folder marked Project Whistler, stamped with Top Secret in faded red ink. Inside were photographs and reports that made my blood run cold. The research team in 1957 had been experimenting with radio waves, trying to create a new way to send signals through mountains and bad weather. But they'd accidentally opened something, a door to somewhere else. The signals had called something through, the dogmen. According to the reports, the creatures weren't attacking people. They were studying us, mimicking us, learning, and they could control temperature and energy as easily as we control our own limbs. The lights flickered again, then went out completely. My flashlight died seconds later. Through the windows, I saw them approaching. A dozen or more dogmen gliding over the snow, leaving trails of mist behind them. I grabbed the files and ran to the radio room. If I could warn someone, anyone. The main radio was old, but looked operational. I fired it up and, miraculously, it worked. I sent out an emergency call on all frequencies. This is Ranger Darius Reynolds at Frost Hollow Observatory. We have a situation. Entities of unknown origin. They came through during the 1957 experiments. They're controlling the weather, the electronics. They're trying to communicate. If anyone can hear me, stay away from... The radio sparked and went silent. The temperature plunged so low it hurt to breathe. Ice formed on the walls, the floor, the equipment. And then they were inside. They moved through walls like they weren't, even there. 5, then 10, then more, filling the room with their shifting, smoke-like forms. Their eyes, so many eyes, all fixed on me. The largest one approached the radio equipment, examining it with what seemed like recognition. It placed a shimmering paw on the transmitter, and the radio came back to life, but different now. The static formed patterns, waves and pulses that somehow made sense to my brain without using actual words. They were talking to me, and finally I understood. They weren't invaders. They were refugees. Their world was dying, freezing solid, and our radio signals had shown them a way here. They didn't mean to hurt anyone. They just didn't understand how fragile humans are to temperature changes. But now there was a problem. The military was testing new radio equipment on the next mountain over. The signals were stronger, different. They were calling more creatures through. Too many, too fast. The fabric between our worlds was tearing. If too many came through at once, both worlds would collapse. The temperature dropped even further. My fingers turned blue. Ice crystals formed in my lungs with each breath. I couldn't survive much longer, like this. The creatures crowded around me, their bodies pulsing with light. Through the radio static, I heard their message clearly. Help. Stop. Signal. I understood what I had to do. The research station had one thing that could help. An emergency generator powerful enough to create an electromagnetic pulse if overloaded. It would fry every electronic device for miles, disrupting the signal that was tearing our worlds apart. But I would have to stay to manually trigger it. There was no remote option, no timer. Someone had to push the button. I nodded to the creatures. I'll help you. They backed away as I struggled to the generator room. My body was shutting down from the cold, my movements slow and clumsy. The largest dogman followed, watching as I worked to overload the system. Outside, the sky had turned a strange purple color. The storm raged, but now I could see tears in the air itself, like rips in fabric, showing another world beyond. A frozen world. More shapes were coming through. I felt it before I saw it. The ground shook under my feet like something big was moving down there, something that shouldn't be awake. My name's Layla Ortiz. I'm a park ranger at Red Earth Canyon in Arizona. The locals call me the Canyon Whisperer, because I know this place better than anyone. My family has lived here for hundreds of years. My grandfather taught me all the old stories about this land. Stories most people think are just make-believe. I wish they were just stories. It was. A hot summer evening, and the sun was setting, turning the canyon walls bright red like they were bleeding. I was finishing my usual walk through the hiking trails, checking that all the tourists had gone back to their cars and hotels for the night. The air felt wrong, heavy, like right before a big storm, but there wasn't a cloud in the sky. Something's not right, I whispered to myself. I touched the silver necklace my grandfather gave me when I was little. He said it would keep me safe from what walks between worlds. Back then, I thought he was just trying to scare me with spooky tales. Now, I'm not so sure. I stopped walking when I heard it. Nothing. Complete silence. No birds, no insects, no wind rustling through the dry bushes. The desert is never this quiet. Something had scared everything away. I turned a corner and saw the diggers' camp. Dr. Miller and his team of scientists had been digging up part of the canyon for weeks now. I told them they shouldn't be there. I told them about the strange marks on the rocks nearby, warning signs from the old people who lived here long ago. But Dr. Miller just laughed at me. Native superstitions, he called them. Ranger Ortiz. Dr. Miller waved me over. He was standing by a hole they'd just dug. Come look at what we found. I walked over slowly. My stomach felt tight, like I was about to be sick. The hole they'd dug showed strange marks carved deep into the rock. They looked like giant claw marks, but no animal I knew could cut through solid rock like it was mud. "Have you ever seen anything like this?" Dr. Miller asked. He sounded excited. "No," I said quietly. "But my grandfather warned me about signs like these. He said they mark places we should leave alone." Dr. Miller rolled his eyes. "Well, we're going to dig deeper tomorrow. This could be a big discovery." As he spoke, I saw a hawk flying in circles above us. It let out a cry that echoed through the canyon, bouncing off the walls and coming back louder than it should have. Everyone looked up. That night, as I walked back to my little house at the ranger station, I heard howling. I've heard coyotes my whole life, but this was different. It was deeper, and it made the hair on my arms stand up. Then my radio started making weird clicking sounds. Not static, more like some kind of code. I looked down at the dry creek bed and froze. There were tracks in the dirt. Big tracks with 3 toes, pressed deep into the ground like whatever made them was very heavy. They were spaced far apart, like giant footsteps. Nothing that big should be in this canyon. I remembered what my grandfather told me years ago. There are things that sleep under the red earth, Layla, things that should never be woken up. That night, I had a dream about something huge moving under the ground, making the earth ripple like water. I woke up suddenly, sure I'd heard those strange clicking sounds again, right outside my window. I should have made everyone leave the canyon that day. I should have tried harder to stop them from digging, because now it's awake and it's angry. The next morning, I woke up early. The sun wasn't even up yet, but I couldn't sleep anymore. Those weird tracks and clicking sounds kept playing in my head. I made myself some coffee and sat on my little porch, watching the sky turn from black to purple to orange. Usually, this was my favorite time of day. Everything quiet and peaceful. But today, even as the sun came up, something felt off. No birds were singing. Not one. I grabbed my backpack, radio, and flashlight, then headed out to check on the dig site before the scientists got there. I wanted to see those strange markings, again without Dr. Miller breathing down my neck. The air was cool, but I knew it wouldn't last. Arizona summers are no joke. By noon, it would be hot enough to fry an egg on a rock. When I got to the dig site, I stopped dead in my tracks. Something was wrong. All their equipment, shovels, brushes, buckets, even the big sifting screens, was scattered everywhere like a giant hand had swept across the camp. Some of the metal tools looked melted, like they'd been in a fire, but there was no burn marks on the ground. "What on earth?" I whispered, kneeling to touch one of the deformed shovels. It was cool to the touch. My radio suddenly burst to life, with those clicking sounds again. Click, click, click. Pause. Click, click. Pause. Click, 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 click. It wasn't random. It had a pattern, like someone tapping out a message. I switched the radio off, but the clicking continued for a few seconds before stopping. That's not how radios work. That's not possible. My heart was beating fast now. I needed to document this before everyone showed up. I took out my phone and started taking pictures of the scattered equipment. That's when I noticed the new marks on the canyon wall. Fresh claw marks, deep in the solid rock like someone had taken a giant rake to it. They were at least 8 feet. Off the ground, way too high for any animal around here, and the rock looked like it had been cut through like butter. I reached out, not quite touching them. The edges were sharp, freshly made. "Hello?" A voice called from behind me, making me jump. "Ranger Ortiz?" It was Mia Chen, one of the graduate students working with Dr. Miller. She was carrying her backpack and looking confused at the mess. "What happened here?" she asked, eyes wide. "I don't know," I said honestly. "It was like this when I got here." Mia walked closer to me, careful not to step on any of the scattered tools. "This is going to sound weird," she said quietly, "but has anything strange been happening to you? Like feeling watched or hearing weird sounds?" My full attention snapped to her. "Why do you ask?" She bit her lip, looking nervous. "Last night, I was cataloging some of the rock samples in our tent. Everyone else had gone back to the hotel in town, but I stayed late. I kept feeling like someone was standing right behind me, but whenever I turned around, nobody was there." I nodded slowly. And then it got really cold. Not just cool, but freezing cold. Like someone had opened a freezer right next to me. But only in one spot. Like I could step 3 feet to the left and it was normal temperature again. The hair on my arms stood up. "Did you see anything?" Shook her head. "No, but..." She paused, looking embarrassed. "This sounds crazy, but I saw a shadow on the tent wall. A huge shadow like a giant bird. But when I looked outside, nothing was there that could have made that shadow." Before I could respond, my phone beeped. The pictures I'd taken of the scattered equipment were all corrupted. Just black screens with weird streaks of light. "Mia," I said slowly, "I think you and the team should pack up and leave the canyon. Just for a few days. Because of some messed up equipment? Dr. Miller would never..." "Not just that," I cut her off. "There's something not right here. I found tracks yesterday. Big tracks that shouldn't exist. And my radio keeps making strange clicking sounds near certain parts of the canyon." As if on cue, my radio started clicking again. Mia's eyes went wide. "That's the sound I heard in the tent," she whispered. By now, the sun was fully up, casting long shadows through the canyon. But one shadow near us didn't match anything standing around. It looked like wings spread across the rock wall. "We need to go," I said, grabbing her arm. "Now!" We started walking quickly back toward the main trail, but stopped when we heard voices. Dr. Miller and the rest of the team were heading our way. "Dr. Miller," I called out. "We need to talk." He looked annoyed when he saw me. "Ranger Ortiz, we have permits for..." Then he saw the mess at the campsite. "What happened here? Did you do this?" "No," I said firmly. "It was like this when I got here, and that's what we need to talk about. Strange things are happening in this canyon, and I think it's connected to your dig." "What kind of strange things?" asked one of the other students, a tall guy named Jake. "Temperature drops in specific spots," Mia jumped in. "Weird shadows, feeling watched. And tracks," I added. "Three-toed tracks too big for any animal in these parts. Plus, look at your equipment. Some of it's melted." Dr. Miller frowned, picking up a twisted metal trowel. "This could have been damaged before. Maybe someone from town is messing with us." "No one from town would come out here at night," I said. "They know better." "Know better than what?" Dr. Miller asked, his voice sharp. "The stories about this place," I said. "My grandfather called this section of the canyon sleeping ground. The old stories say something dangerous rests beneath it." Dr. Miller sighed loudly. "Ranger Ortiz. With all due respect to your cultural heritage, we can't base scientific decisions on folk tales. This is probably just vandalism." "Then explain the claw marks," I said, pointing to the fresh scratches high on the rock wall. Everyone turned to look. Dr. Miller's face changed as he studied them. "Those weren't there yesterday," he admitted. "I want to show you something else," I said, walking toward the area they'd been excavating. The others followed. The dig site had changed overnight, too. The hole they'd made was now much deeper, as if something had been digging from below. At the bottom, something glinted in the morning light. "What is that?" Jake asked, stepping closer to the edge. Before anyone could answer, the ground trembled beneath our feet. Just a small shake, like a truck driving by. Except there were no trucks out here. Probably just a minor earthquake, Dr. Miller said. But he didn't sound convinced. I looked up at the sky. No birds, not even insects buzzing. The whole canyon was dead silent except for our voices. "Dr. Miller," I said as calmly as I could, "I'm officially requesting that you stop. this excavation until we can get experts to look at these unusual occurrences." He looked like he was about to argue, but then another tremor shook the ground, stronger this time. One of the students lost her balance and would have fallen into the dig hole if Jake hadn't caught her arm. "Maybe we should take a break," Mia suggested, looking scared now. "Just for today, to figure out what's going on." Dr. Miller looked at his scattered and damaged equipment, the strange claw marks, and finally at his nervous team. "Fine," he said at last. "We'll head back to town and replace the damaged equipment, just for today." As everyone started gathering what tools they could salvage, I walked to the edge of the dig site and looked down into the hole. The glinting object was more visible now, something smooth and curved, like a giant scale or plate buried in the red earth. Another tremor shook the ground, and for a split second I could have sworn I saw the strange object pulse with a faint blue light. Something was down there, something alive, and we had disturbed its sleep. I spent the afternoon walking every inch of the canyon looking for more strange signs. The scientists had gone back to town, but they'd be back tomorrow. Dr. Miller wasn't the type to stay away for long, especially with that shiny thing they'd found in the dig site. The sun was starting to set again, painting the rocks that deep red color that gave the canyon its name. I'd found more of those three-toed tracks, this time leading in a circle around the dig site, almost like something was pacing, watching. My radio hadn't made those clicking sounds for hours now. Maybe whatever was causing it had stopped, or maybe it was just waiting. I decided to do one last check of the dig site before heading back to my cabin for the night. As I got closer, I felt the air change. It got heavier, harder to breathe, and colder. Way too cold for a summer evening in Arizona. Then I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a shadow moving across the canyon wall. The sun was setting, so shadows were everywhere. But this one moved wrong. It didn't follow the path of the sun. It moved by itself. I froze in place, watching. The shadow was huge, shaped like a bird with its wings spread wide, but bigger than any bird alive today. It slid across the rock face like it was alive, even though there was nothing in the sky, casting it. "Hello?" I called out, feeling stupid as soon as I said it. Whatever was making that shadow wasn't going to answer me. The shadow stopped moving when I spoke. Then it seemed to turn, like it was looking right at me. My heart pounded, so hard I could feel it in my throat. I should run, I thought, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at this impossible shadow. Then the ground under my feet began to move. Not shake like an earthquake. Move like water. Like something big was sliding right under the surface. The dirt and small rocks rippled in a line, heading straight for me. I finally found my legs and jumped to the side, landing hard on my hip as the ripple passed right where I'd been standing. The shadow on the wall suddenly stretched, growing larger, spreading across the entire cliff face. And then, I still don't know how to explain this part, it peeled off the wall, like the shadow just stepped out of the rock, pulled itself into our world. What I saw wasn't fully solid. It was like looking at something underwater, wavering and not quite clear, but I could make out the shape of a massive bird with a head that was almost like a lizard's. Its wings spread so wide they blocked out most of the sky above me. Instead of feathers, it had scales that caught the last light of day and broke it into little rainbow patterns. The strange thing is, I wasn't scared anymore. I was amazed. This creature was ancient and powerful, but I didn't feel like it wanted to hurt me. Not yet, anyway. It hovered there, half in our world and half somewhere else, watching me with eyes that glowed blue like lightning. My pendant, the one my grandfather gave me, suddenly felt hot against my skin. I reached up to touch it, and when my fingers made contact, a spark jumped from the silver to my hand. The creature's head tilted like it was curious. Then it made that clicking sound, the same one that had been coming through my radio. But now I could see that the sound came from its beak opening and closing, too fast for a normal animal. "What are you?" I whispered. In response, the air around me filled with static electricity. The hair on my arms stood up. My radio switched on by itself, and through the static I heard what sounded like words, not in English or Spanish or any language I knew. The creature, the Thunderbird, I realized, just like in my grandfather's stories, moved closer, not flying, not walking, but sort of shifting, like it was stepping through invisible doors to get nearer to me. It stopped about 20 feet away, close enough that I could feel waves of cold rolling off it, close enough to see that its eyes weren't just glowing. They were made of living electricity, little lightning bolts constantly moving inside them. My radio crackled again, and this time I heard something that sounded almost like English. Dig. Stop. Danger. Below. The Thunderbird's head jerked toward the excavation site. It seemed upset, agitated. "The dig?" I asked, feeling crazy for trying to talk to it. "You want them to stop digging?" The creature's wings flapped once, creating a blast of cold air that nearly knocked me over. More words came through my radio. Protect. Sleeper. Must. Not. Wake. I suddenly understood. The Thunderbird wasn't the danger. It was a guardian. A protector. And we were about to unleash something much worse. "What's down there?" I asked. "What are you protecting us from?" The Thunderbird's form flickered like a TV with bad reception. For a second, it seemed almost transparent and then solid again. It opened its beak, and this time, I heard the voice directly in my head, clearer now. "Old One sleeps, bound by first people, must stay buried." A picture flashed in my mind, something massive and shapeless with too many limbs sleeping in a chamber deep beneath the canyon floor. The same shiny thing the scientists had found was part of some kind of seal or lock, keeping this old one trapped. The vision faded, and the Thunderbird was watching me again, waiting. "I tried to stop them," I said. "They won't listen to me." The creature made a sound like thunder rumbling far away. Somehow, I knew it was frustrated. Not with me, but with the situation. Must. Listen. Or die. My blood went cold. "Are you threatening to kill them?" The Thunderbird's head shook side to side, almost like a human saying, "No." Its form flickered again. "Not me. Old One. If wakes, all die." I understood then. The Thunderbird wasn't threatening anyone. It was warning me. If the scientists kept digging and broke whatever seal was down there, they'd release something terrible. "How do I stop them?" I asked. "They don't believe in things like you. They think the old stories are just myths." The Thunderbird's wings spread wider, and suddenly the evening sky filled with clouds that hadn't been there moments before. A low rumble of thunder rolled across the canyon. "Show them," it said through my radio. And then it did something I'll never forget. It fully solidified, becoming completely real and physical in our world. Its massive talons gripped the red earth, leaving those three-toed prints I'd been finding. Its wings created wind that whipped dust into mini tornadoes around us. With a screech that hurt my ears, it launched itself into the sky. Lightning flashed between its wings, illuminating the entire canyon. For a few seconds, anyone looking up from miles around would have seen it, clear as day. Then it dove straight down toward the dig site. Instead of crashing into the ground, it passed through it, like a ghost through a wall. The earth rippled again as it disappeared below the surface. A moment later, the entire dig site collapsed in on itself with a sound like thunder. Dust and dirt flew into the air, and the ground shook so hard I fell to my knees. When everything settled, the excavation was gone, filled in like it had never been there. But in its place was a perfect image of the Thunderbird, pressed into the earth like a giant stamp. My radio crackled one last time. Tell them, show them, make them leave. Then silence. The temperature slowly returned to normal. The unnatural stillness that had gripped the canyon lifted, and I heard a distant coyote howl. I sat there in the growing darkness, trying to process what I'd just seen. Part of me wondered if I'd imagined it all, but the giant bird image pressed into the earth was very real. One thing was clear. I had to convince Dr. Miller and his team to stop digging permanently, but they'd never believe me without proof. I looked down at my phone and noticed it was still recording video. I'd started filming when I first saw the shadow moving. With shaking hands, I played back the footage. There it was, not as clear as seeing it in person, but unmistakable. A massive, bird-like creature made of shadows and lightning, hovering in the air before diving into the earth. Had my proof. Now, I just had to make them believe it before it was too late. As I walked back to my cabin in the dark, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched from below. Not by the Thunderbird, but by something else. Something ancient and angry that we'd disturbed. Something that was starting to wake up. I spent the afternoon walking every inch of the canyon, looking for more strange signs. The scientists had gone back to town, but they'd be back tomorrow. Dr. Miller wasn't the type to stay away for long, especially with that shiny thing they'd found in the dig site. The sun was starting to set again, painting the rocks that deep red color that gave the canyon its name. I'd found more of those three-toed tracks, this time leading in a circle around the dig site, almost like something was pacing, watching. My radio hadn't made those clicking sounds for hours now. Maybe whatever was causing it had stopped, or maybe it was just waiting. I decided to do one last check of the dig site before heading back to my cabin for the night. As I got closer, I felt the air change. It got heavier, harder to breathe, and colder, way too cold for a summer evening in Arizona. Then I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a shadow moving across the canyon wall. The sun was setting, so shadows were everywhere. But this one moved wrong. It didn't follow the path of the sun. It moved by itself. I froze in place, watching. The shadow was huge, shaped like a bird with its wings spread wide, but bigger than any bird alive today. It slid across the rock face like it was alive, even though there was nothing in the sky, casting it. "Hello?" I called out, feeling stupid as soon as I said it. Whatever was making that shadow wasn't going to answer me. The shadow stopped moving when I spoke. Then it seemed to turn, like it was looking right at me. My heart pounded, so hard I could feel it in my throat. I should run, I thought, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at this impossible shadow. Then the ground under my feet began to move. Not shake like an earthquake, move like water, like something big was sliding right under the surface. The dirt and small rocks rippled in a line, heading straight for me. I finally found my legs and jumped to the side, landing hard on my hip as the ripple passed right where I'd been standing. The shadow on the wall suddenly stretched, growing larger, spreading across the entire cliff face. And then, I still don't know how to explain this part, it peeled off the wall, like the shadow just stepped out of the rock, pulled itself into our world. What I saw wasn't fully solid. It was like looking at something underwater, wavering and not quite clear, but I could make out the shape of a massive bird with a head that was almost like a lizard's. Its wings spread so wide they blocked out most of the sky above me. Instead of feathers, it had scales that caught the last light of day and broke it into little rainbow patterns. The strange thing is, I wasn't scared anymore. I was amazed. This creature was ancient and powerful, but I didn't feel like it wanted to hurt me. Not yet, anyway. It hovered there, half in our world and half somewhere else, watching me with eyes that glowed blue like lightning. My pendant, the one my grandfather gave me, suddenly felt hot against my skin. I reached up to touch it, and when my fingers made contact, a spark jumped from the silver to my hand. The creature's head tilted like it was curious. Then it made that clicking sound, the same one that had been coming through my radio. but now I could see that the sound came from its beak opening and closing, too fast for a normal animal. "What are you?" I whispered. In response, the air around me filled with static electricity. The hair on my arms stood up. My radio switched on by itself, and through the static, I heard what sounded like words, not in English or Spanish or any language I knew. The creature, the Thunderbird, I realized, just like in my grandfather's stories, moved closer, not flying, not walking, but sort of shifting, like it was stepping through invisible doors to get nearer to me. It stopped about 20 feet away, close enough that I could feel waves of cold rolling off it, close enough to see that its eyes weren't just glowing. They were made of living electricity, little lightning bolts constantly moving inside them. My radio crackled again, and this time I heard something that sounded almost like English. Dig. Stop. Danger. Below. The Thunderbird's head jerked toward the excavation site. It seemed upset, agitated. "The dig?" I asked, feeling crazy for trying to talk to it. "You want them to stop digging?" The creature's wings flapped once, creating a blast of cold air that nearly knocked me over. More words came through my radio. Protect. Sleeper. Must. Not. Wake. I suddenly understood. The Thunderbird wasn't the danger. It was a guardian, a protector, and we were about to unleash something much worse. "What's down there?" I asked. "What are you protecting us from?" The Thunderbird's form flickered like a TV with bad reception. For a second it seemed almost transparent and then solid again. It opened its beak, and this time I heard the voice directly in my head, clearer now. "Old One sleeps, bound by First People, must stay buried." A picture flashed in my mind. Something massive and shapeless, with too many limbs, sleeping in a chamber deep beneath the canyon floor. The same shiny thing the scientists had found was part of some kind of seal or lock, keeping this Old One trapped. The vision faded, and the Thunderbird was watching me again, waiting. "I tried to stop them," I said. "They won't listen to me." The creature made a sound like thunder rumbling far away. Somehow, I knew it was frustrated. Not with me, but with the situation. Must. Listen. Or die. My blood went cold. "Are you threatening to kill them?" The Thunderbird's head shook side to side, almost like a human saying no. Its form flickered again. "Not me. Old One. If wakes, all die." I understood then. The Thunderbird wasn't threatening anyone. It was warning me. If the scientists kept digging and broke whatever seal was down there, they'd release something terrible. "How do I stop them?" I asked. "They don't believe in things like you. They think the old stories are just myths." The Thunderbird's wings spread wider, and suddenly the evening sky filled with clouds that hadn't been there moments before. A low rumble of thunder rolled across the canyon. "Show them," it said through my radio. And then it did something I'll never forget. It fully solidified, becoming completely real and physical in our world. Its massive talons gripped the red earth, leaving those three-toed prints I'd been finding. Its wings created wind that whipped dust into mini tornadoes around us. With a screech that hurt my ears, it launched itself into the sky. Lightning flashed between its wings, illuminating the entire canyon. For a few seconds, anyone looking up, from miles around, would have seen it, clear as day. Then it dove straight down toward the dig site. Instead of crashing into the ground, it passed through it like a ghost through a wall. The earth rippled again as it disappeared below the surface. A moment later, the entire dig site collapsed in on itself with a sound like thunder. Dust and dirt flew into the air, and the ground shook so hard I fell to my knees. When everything settled, the excavation was gone, filled in like it had never been there. But in its place was a perfect image of the Thunderbird, pressed into the earth like a giant stamp. My radio crackled one last time. Tell them, show them, make them leave. Then silence. The temperature slowly returned to normal. The unnatural stillness that had gripped the canyon lifted, and I heard a distant coyote howl. I sat there in the growing darkness, trying to process what I'd just seen. Part of me wondered if I'd imagined it all, but the giant bird image pressed into the earth was very real. One thing was clear. I had to convince Dr. Miller and his team to stop digging permanently. But they'd never believe me without proof. Looked down at my phone and noticed it was still recording video. I'd started filming when I first saw the shadow moving. With shaking hands, I played back the footage. There it was, not as clear as seeing it in person, but unmistakable. A massive, bird-like creature made of shadows and lightning, hovering in the air before diving into the earth. I had my proof. Now, I just had to make them believe it before it was too late. As I walked back to my cabin in the dark, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched from below. Not by the Thunderbird, but by something else. Something ancient and angry that we'd disturbed. Something that was starting to wake up. I knew the forest was watching me long before I saw the eyes in the trees. My name is Victor Hargrove. I've been a forest ranger at Pinewood National Forest for 20 years now. These tall pines and winding trails are more home to me than the small cabin where I sleep. I know every hill, every creek, every turn in the path. Or at least I thought I did. It was a late afternoon in early October when everything changed. The sun was starting to sink, making long shadows stretch across the ground. Golden light peeked through the pine branches. I was walking an old trail we were thinking about fixing up for hikers. The air smelled fresh and clean, like pine needles and dirt after rain. With each step, my boots made that soft, crunching sound I've always loved. The sound of being alone, in the wild. In a small clearing to my right, a family of deer was nibbling on grass. They barely looked up when I passed. After so many years, the animals here know me. I stopped to write some notes about the trail in my little book. That's when I first noticed something odd about the trees nearby. The bark had strange patterns, almost like faces if you looked at them just right. I told myself it was just my imagination, like seeing shapes in clouds. But I still wrote it down. I write down everything I see in these woods. The sound of Blackstone Creek kept me company as I walked. I've always loved how the rushing water sounds like nature's own special music. But then something strange happened. Dark clouds rolled in out of nowhere, turning the bright forest dim and gray. One minute it was sunny, the next it was almost like evening had come early. And as the sky darkened, something else changed too. The forest went quiet. Too quiet. The creek seemed to hush its bubbling. The birds stopped singing. Even the wind died down, leaving the pine needles still and silent. I stood frozen in place, barely breathing. In 20 years, I'd never heard the forest this silent. It was like the whole world was holding its breath, waiting for something. "Hello," I called, out. My voice sounded wrong and all that quiet, too loud, like shouting in a library. That's when I felt it, the feeling of being watched. Not by the deer or birds or any normal forest creature. This was different. This felt intelligent. I turned slowly in a circle, my eyes searching between the trees. The shadows seemed deeper than they should be, darker, and in those shadows I could swear something moved, something big. Most people would have turned around right then, smart people. But 20 years in these woods had made me more curious than scared, or maybe just not scared enough. I took a step toward those deep shadows. "Is someone there?" I called. No answer came, just that heavy silence. But I could feel it. Eyes watching my every move. I should have known then that this was just the beginning. that my quiet life as a forest ranger was about to become something else entirely. That everything I thought I knew about these woods, about the world, was about to change. I didn't know then that the forest had secrets, ancient secrets it had kept for hundreds of years, and now, for some reason, it was ready to show them to me. I took another step forward, toward the shadows where I felt those unseen eyes. I had no idea that by doing so, I was walking into a mystery, bigger and older than anything I could imagine. No idea that I wasn't just exploring the forest anymore. The forest was finally letting me in. Most people in town think I'm a bit strange. I see it in their eyes when I talk about the forest. They smile and nod, but I can tell what they're thinking. Poor old Victor, spending too much time alone with the trees. Maybe they're right. Maybe 20 years as a forest ranger has changed me. But the forest changes everyone who really pays attention to it. I wasn't always a ranger. I used to be a college teacher, a professor of anthropology. That means I studied how people lived long ago. I got really interested in ancient tribes, who lived in forests and the special ways they connected with the trees around them. My ideas made the other professors uncomfortable. They said my theories weren't real science. So I left, became a ranger instead. Out here, I don't have to prove anything to anyone. My cabin sits at the edge of the forest. It's nothing fancy, just a small wooden house with a porch where I can sit and watch the trees. Inside, my walls are covered with maps of Pinewood Forest. I've marked all the strange things I've found over the years. Unusual footprints, broken branches too high for normal animals to reach, odd marks on trees that almost look like writing. My daughter Eliza calls it my mystery wall. She's in college, now, studying science like I used to. She visits during her breaks from school and helps me with my notes, but I can tell she thinks her dad is getting a little crazy. She's always trying to find normal reasons for the strange things I show her. Dad. There's a simple explanation for everything, she always says. That's how science works. She's probably right, but science doesn't explain the dreams. They started about a year ago. In these dreams, I'm sleeping in my bed when I feel eyes watching me from the dark corners of my room. When I wake up in the morning, I find dirt and pine needles in my sheets, like I've been walking in the forest during the night. But I never remember getting up. I haven't told anyone about the dreams, not even Eliza. I'm afraid of what they might mean. My ex-wife, Linda, already thinks I've lost my mind. She left 6 months ago. The divorce papers are still in my drawer, unsigned. I can't seem to let go. When she left, she said I'd changed, that the forest had gotten into my head. Maybe she was right. The other rangers are nice enough. They respect my knowledge about plants and animals, but they talk about me when they think I can't hear. Good old Victor, they say. Smart guy, but a little off his rocker. Still, they come to me when they need help figuring out animal behavior or plant diseases. I might be odd, but I know these woods. Or I thought I did. Last month, I asked my boss to close some parts of the eastern forest. I told him there was unusual activity there. What I didn't say was that my compass goes crazy in that area, spinning in circles like it's confused. Or that I found strange structures there, branches twisted together in ways that couldn't happen naturally. He said, no, of course. We can't close parts of a national forest because you have a feeling, Victor. So I've been watching those areas myself, walking out there with my special walking stick. My grandfather made it. Wood with iron nails hammered into it in a pattern. For protection, he always said. I never asked what we needed protection from. I'm starting to think I should have asked. As I sit at my kitchen table, looking through my notebook at the latest strange things I've found, I can't shake the feeling that something is changing in my forest. The face-like patterns in the tree bark, the unnatural silence yesterday, the feeling of being watched. Something is different. Something is waking up. And somehow, it knows I'm the one who's been paying attention. I close my notebook and look out my window at the trees. The sun is setting, painting them golden and red. Beautiful. Peaceful. But I know better now. I know the forest is watching back. It started with footprints. I found them early one morning after a light rain had fallen overnight. They were pressed deep into the mud near Blackstone Creek, clear as day. But these weren't normal footprints. They were huge, almost 20 inches long, and shaped like a bare human foot, but much, much bigger. The toes were spread wide, and I could see little skin lines in the mud, like the lines on your fingers but on a giant foot. I took pictures with my phone and made plaster casts before the rain could wash them away. When I showed them to Bill, another ranger, he just laughed. "Bear. Tracks," he said, hardly looking at them. "Front paw probably dragged a bit, made it look longer. But I've seen bear tracks almost every day for 20 years. These weren't bear tracks. Not even close." A few days later, I found something even stranger. Along the eastern ridge, where the oldest trees grow, dozens of trees had their bark carefully removed in perfect shapes. Triangles, circles, straight lines. The patterns were too perfect for an animal to make. Too careful. Whatever did this took its time, making exact shapes that seemed to mean something. "Teenagers," said my boss when I reported it. Probably some new thing they're doing for social media. But we hadn't seen any teenagers in that area for months. The nearest parking lot was 5 miles away, and the patterns were fresh. Strange things kept happening. My compass, which had worked perfectly for years, started acting weird in certain parts of the forest, especially near those bark-stripped trees. The needle would spin wildly, pointing in all directions at once. I had to navigate by the sun, like people did before compasses were invented. Then there were the wildlife cameras. We had set them up to count deer, snapping pictures when something moved in front of them. They worked fine during the day, taking clear pictures of deer, foxes, the occasional bear. But at night, just static. Hours of it. As if something was moving there, triggering the cameras, but somehow not showing up in the pictures. I started finding structures in faraway clearings, branches bent and twisted together to form little dome-shaped shelters, big enough for something large to fit inside. They weren't random piles. The branches were carefully chosen and woven together with a purpose I couldn't figure out. Then hikers started going missing. Just for a few hours at first, they would show up at ranger stations looking confused, saying they had lost time. They remembered walking on a trail, then suddenly it was 3 hours later and they were somewhere else in the forest with no memory of how they got there. The search parties reported odd things too. Knocking sounds echoing through the valleys like someone hitting trees with sticks in a pattern. It always seemed to come from all directions at once, making it impossible to tell where it started. I found a strange hair caught on the barbed wire fence along the park's northern border. Thick, coarse hair that didn't match any animal I knew. I sent it to a lab, and their report said the DNA was inconclusive, with unknown genetic markers. In simple words, they didn't know what animal it came from. One morning, I came back to my cabin to find someone, or something, had been inside. It wasn't like a bare break-in with things knocked over and torn apart. This was careful. My journals were open on my desk. The maps where I'd marked strange occurrences were laid out, like someone had been studying them. Nothing was taken except my food, beef jerky, canned beans, and trail mix. No person would break in, look through my research, and only steal my food. The rock formations were what convinced me something truly strange was happening. In a remote northern valley, I had taken pictures of some natural rock piles. When I returned just one day later, the rocks had been stacked into perfect towers, balanced so carefully that even the wind couldn't knock them over. It would have taken hours of patient work, but who would hike this far into the wilderness just to stack rocks? Then came the backpacks. 5 hikers went missing on the same day, the most ever in our forest. We found them 3 days later, tired and confused but not hurt. They had no memory of what happened after their first night camping, but we found their backpacks arranged in a perfect circle in a clearing 2 miles from their campsite. Nothing was taken except their food. Their expensive cameras, phones, and wallets were untouched. As I stood looking at those backpacks, the hair on my neck stood up. I felt eyes on me again. Not just one pair, but many. I turned slowly, scanning the trees around the clearing. That's when I saw it. Just for a second, between 2 distant pines, a massive shadow standing upright like a person, but much, much taller. It moved without making a sound, there one moment and gone the next. I ran toward it without thinking, my heart pounding. By the time I reached the spot, whatever I had seen was gone. But pressed into the soft earth was a single, massive footprint, just like the ones I had found months ago. I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't crazy. Something was in my forest. And now I had seen it. The first time I really saw them was at sunset. I had been following those huge footprints for hours, going deeper into the forest than I usually went. The sun was getting low, painting the sky orange between the pine branches. I should have turned back. Walking in the deep forest after dark is dangerous, even for someone like me who knows these woods well. But I couldn't stop. Not when I was so close to answers. The footprints led to a small valley I'd never been to before. As I got to the top of the hill overlooking it, I stopped dead in my tracks. There, in the fading light, stood not one but 3 massive figures. They were at least 8 feet tall, covered in thick matted hair that was dark brown to reddish on 2 of them, and mixed with gray on the biggest one. They stood upright like people, their strong bodies outlined against the darkening sky. Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever name you want to use, there they were, real as the trees around them. I dropped to my stomach, crawling forward to watch from behind, a fallen log. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they would hear it. They were moving rocks, making another one of those strange tower formations I'd been finding. Their hands were huge but worked carefully, placing each stone with gentle precision. I reached slowly for my phone to take a picture, but before my hand was halfway to my pocket, all 3 heads snapped up at once, looking right at my hiding spot. I froze. I barely breathed. There was no way they could have heard me. Then something strange happened. I felt a sort of pressure in my head. Not painful, but weird. Images started flashing in my mind. Danger warnings, curiosity, ancient forests, deep caves glowing with blue light. It was like watching a movie inside my head, but I wasn't the one playing it. They were somehow putting these pictures in my mind, communicating with me without words. The largest one, with gray streaks in its hair, took a step toward me. My brain screamed to run, but I stayed still. "I'm not here to hurt you," I said out loud, my voice shaking a little. The pressure in my mind changed, becoming more like a question. Curious. Slowly, I stood up, raising my hands to show I had no weapons. "My name is Victor. I'm a friend." The 3 creatures stood perfectly still, watching me with dark, intelligent eyes. Then, faster than something so big should be able to move, they disappeared into the trees. Not running away, but simply gone, like they had melted into the forest itself. Over the next few weeks, they let me see them more and more. I learned there were 8 of them total, a family group. They could move without making any sound when they wanted to, or copy any forest sound perfectly. They could stand so still that your eyes would pass right over them, like they were just another tree. The one with gray streaks was their leader. I started calling him Elder in my head, and somehow I knew he understood this name. They never let me get too close, but they allowed me to watch them. I saw them use stone tools, talk to each other through complex knocking patterns on trees, and wear simple decorations made of bones and feathers. I figured out they were protecting something, a cave system deep in the forest that gave off a strange blue glow. Whenever I tried to walk in that direction, they would appear, standing silently in my path, a warning not to go further. One night, as I sat by my small campfire deep in the woods, Elder came closer than ever before. He stood at the edge of the firelight, watching me. The mental pressure came again, stronger this time. Pictures flooded my mind. Humans with guns, captures, deaths, hundreds of years of hiding, protecting the blue cave. I saw through his eyes what it was like to watch humans slowly take more and more of their forest, to be hunted, to be called a myth or a monster. I felt their fear, their anger, their determination to protect what was theirs. When the vision ended, I was on my knees, tears running down my face. Elder was gone, but he had left something beside my backpack, a small stone carved with spiral patterns, glowing faintly blue in the darkness. A gift, a sign of trust. I knew then that I had been allowed to see them for a reason. They needed my help. What I didn't know was that I had already put them in terrible danger. As I walked back to my cabin the next morning, I saw unfamiliar trucks parked outside. People with equipment were unloading cases and setting up tents. And standing by my front door was a face I hadn't seen in years. My old research partner, Dr. Lynn Matthews. She smiled when she saw me, but something about that smile made my stomach twist with worry. "Victor, there you are," she called out. "We have so much to talk about." I clutched the blue stone in my pocket, suddenly afraid of what was coming. "Victor, I've been trying to reach you for days," Lynn said, walking toward me, with open arms like we were still old friends. I hadn't seen my former research partner in years, not since I left the university. Her sudden appearance at my cabin made my stomach knot up. "What brings you all the way out here?" I asked, carefully sliding the blue stone deeper into my pocket. "Your emails, of course," she said, looking excited. "The footprint pictures you sent, the hair samples, the strange photos." She lowered her voice and stepped closer. "The government is very interested, Victor. They sent me and my team to help you." My blood went cold. "I only sent those to you for your opinion, as a friend, and my opinion is that you found something amazing." Her eyes had a gleam I didn't like. "I've brought people, equipment. We're going to catch one." "Catch one?" The words felt wrong in my mouth. "For science," she said quickly. "We'll be careful." "Of course. Think about what we could learn. The medical discoveries alone could change everything. Not to mention," she smiled, "we'd be famous, Victor. We'd never have to worry about money or grants again." That night, I couldn't sleep. Lynn's team had set up camp near my cabin. Through my window, I watched them unpack tranquilizer guns, metal cages, tracking devices with blinking lights. I thought about Elder's visions. Hundreds of years of humans hunting them, killing them, forcing them deeper into hiding. I thought about the trust they had shown me. The stone in my pocket seemed to grow warmer, like it was reminding me it was there, and I made my choice. Before sunrise, I snuck away from my cabin and hiked to the valley where I had first seen them. I knocked on trees in the pattern I had learned, calling them. Elder appeared silently beside me, his massive shape appearing between the trees as if by magic. The mental connection formed right away. I showed him the danger, Lynn, the team, the cages, the guns. I felt his understanding, then a wave of such deep anger that it almost knocked me down. More of the clan appeared, surrounding me. For a scary moment, I thought they might think I had set them up, betrayed them. But Elder placed one huge hand gently on my shoulder. In my mind, I saw us standing together against Lynn's team. I had chosen my side. We moved through the forest like shadows, the clan using their special ability to blend with the trees to stay hidden. I led them toward Lynn's team, who had already started setting traps in the eastern part of the forest. "Lynn," I called out, stepping into the clearing where they worked. "You need to stop this, now." "Victor?" She looked confused. Stop what? This is the chance of a lifetime. They're intelligent, I said firmly. They have a culture, a language. This isn't a zoo collection. This is first contact with another intelligent species. She laughed. You always did have a big imagination. Victor, they're just animals. No, I said, standing tall. They're people, and this is their home. I felt them before I saw them. The clan, stepping out from the trees around the clearing. 8 massive figures, standing in plain sight for the first time in perhaps hundreds of years. Lynn's team froze in shock. My God, she whispered. There's so many. One of her assistants panicked, raising his tranquilizer gun. I moved to stop him, but I was too slow. The dart flew, hitting one of the younger clan members. With a roar that seemed to shake the trees, Elder charged. What happened next was chaos. The clan moved with perfect teamwork, knocking down the humans and breaking their equipment with scary strength and speed. Cameras were crushed, tents torn apart. In all the confusion, I didn't see Lynn aim her own gun. I just felt the sharp sting, as the dart meant for Elder hit me instead. As the tranquilizer drug made my body go numb, I collapsed to the ground. The last thing I saw was Elder picking up my limp body, and the trees closing around us as he carried me deeper into the forest than any human had gone before. The official report said I was missing, presumed dead in a rock slide. Lynn's team, scared out of their minds and with all their equipment destroyed, talked about hallucinations caused by forest gases. No one believed their wild stories about giant ape men. The caves were much bigger than I had imagined, glowing with that strange blue light. As I recovered from the tranquilizer, Elder showed me their true purpose, not just as homes, but as guardians. The blue light came from crystals older than human cities, pulsing with energy I couldn't understand. The clan nursed me back to health. They showed me their ways, their history carved into the cave walls. They had been here since before humans, built the first cities, watching, protecting the forest and its secrets. Years have passed now. Sometimes I think about Eliza, about the world I left behind. But I made my choice, and I don't regret it. Hikers sometimes report seeing an older human figure moving with strange, large shadows in the deepest parts of Pinewood Forest. The rangers dismiss these stories as tall tales. But if you walk those remote trails and feel eyes watching you from between the trees, listen carefully. You might hear knocking sounds echoing through the valleys. That's me, talking to my family, telling them which humans are safe and which ones to watch. Because the forest has always been watching. And now I watch with it. When people ask about the strange disappearances in Pinewood National Forest, the rangers tell them to stay on marked trails. They say it's easy to get lost in those ancient woods. They have no idea how right they are. Sometimes, getting lost is how you find where you truly belong. The scream woke me that night, a human scream that didn't come from a human throat. My name is Patricia Donovan, and I've been the ranger at Raven Lake for 3 years now. Most people think being a park ranger means helping lost hikers and telling kids not to feed the squirrels. They don't know about the nights when the mist rolls in, when the water moves without wind, when something ancient stirs below the surface. I still remember my first morning at Raven Lake. The fog was thick as cream soup, hanging low over water so still it looked like black glass. Pine trees stood like silent giants along the shore, their reflection perfect until a loon's call shattered the mirror. The sound traveled across the water, haunting, lonely, like it was calling to something hidden in the mist. That was 3 years ago, before I knew what lived in Raven Lake. The campgrounds are nearly empty now. Labor Day weekend ended with a rush of families packing up their tents and coolers, kids whining about returning to school. Just a few stubborn campers remain, an older couple in an RV, 2 fishing buddies in a small tent, and a family with teenage twins who beg to stay just one more day. If only they knew what I know. This morning, I walked the wooden dock that stretches into the eastern shore. My boots made hollow sounds on the planks as I knelt to check the water quality readings. The smell of pine needles and damp earth filled my lungs, normally my favorite part of dawn patrol. But something was wrong. The water seemed murky near the center, and ripples spread across the surface, though there wasn't a hint of wind. "You're imagining things again, Trish," I whispered to myself, but I knew better. My fingers found the compass in my pocket. My father's compass. Dad was a ranger too, right here at Raven Lake. In 1952, he went on a routine patrol and never came back. They found his jacket caught on a branch near the North Shore, but nothing else. Mom always said he must have fallen in and drowned, but they never found his body. Now, I stand where he once stood, watching the same mist curl over the same water, feeling something watching me back. The chipmunks darted across fallen logs near me, gathering acorns in their cheeks. Normal forest sounds surrounded me. Birds calling, leaves rustling, the gentle lap of water against the shore. Everything seemed perfect, peaceful. But I know better. Something lives in Raven Lake. Something old, something patient, something hungry, and I think it's finally ready to feed again. Most rangers take this job because they love nature, want to work outdoors. I came here to hide. Before Raven Lake, I was a marine biologist working for a big research company. I spent my days collecting evidence of how chemical plants were poisoning coastal waters. Then one day, my reports disappeared, right before a major environmental hearing. My boss patted my shoulder and said, "Sometimes we need to look at the bigger picture, Patricia." The bigger picture being the fat check the company got from those same chemical plants. So I quit. Then my husband quit on me too, said I'd become obsessed, that I cared more about dead fish than our marriage. Maybe he was right. When the position at Raven Lake opened up, it seemed perfect. A quiet place. A place to heal. A place where the only person I'd disappoint was myself. I wear my dark hair in a long braid down my back now. My face has weathered from sun and wind. The other rangers at the regional office call me the scientist because I keep detailed records of everything. Weather patterns, animal sightings, water temperatures. They laugh at my precision, but they never question my reports. They just ignore them. "Budget constraints," is all Regional Director Morgan says when I show him the unusual readings from the lake. 3 times I've requested environmental contamination studies. 3 times I've been denied. What would they say if I told them the truth? That something lives in that lake? Something that isn't in any wildlife guidebook? The nightmares started 6 months ago. Every night, the same dream. I'm underwater, sinking deeper into blackness. Something wraps around my ankles, pulling me down. I try to scream, but water fills my lungs. I wake up gasping, sheets soaked with sweat. My dad's old journals sit in a box under my bed. I never read them before, afraid of what feelings they might stir up. But last night, I pulled them out. Most pages contain normal ranger observations, beaver dam locations, weather notes, visitor counts. But the last entry, dated the day before he disappeared, says only, "It's in the water. God help me, it's aware." What did you find, Dad? What took you from us? The lake is calling to me now, just as it must have called to him. Every morning, I find myself walking a little deeper into the shallows. Every evening, I stay a little later watching the mist form. Something is happening at Raven Lake. Something is changing, and I'm the only one who sees it. It started with the fish. I found them one morning along the eastern shore. Dozens of them, bellies up. Their scales strangely dissolved in patches, not normal decay. It looked like acid burns. Then came the water samples. Under my microscope, I saw organisms I couldn't identify, things that shouldn't exist in fresh water. Tiny, translucent things that moved with purpose, then disappeared when I tried to isolate them. "Probably just contamination on the slide," said Pete, the only other ranger who sometimes visits from the main office, but I knew what I saw. Last week, I found a deer carcass half submerged near the northern inlet. Its hind legs and belly were gone, not torn or bitten, but dissolved, like it had been dipped in something caustic. The strangest part? No flies touched it. Nothing would go near it. My equipment started failing next. Batteries dead overnight. Water testing kits giving impossible readings. My camera developed strange light spots whenever I photographed the lake. Then the Millers, the family with the teenage twins, stopped by my station yesterday. "Something's wrong with the lake," Mrs. Miller said, her voice shaking. "Last night we heard voices coming from the fog." "What kind of voices?" I asked, my mouth dry. "They were calling Danny's name." Mr. Miller put his arm around his son. He started walking toward the water in his sleep. We had to hold him back. The boy wouldn't look at me. "They said they needed to show me something," he whispered. "Something important under the water." I sent them packing that afternoon, made up some story about unsafe bacteria levels. They didn't argue. That night I found unusual tracks along the muddy shore, wide, webbed impressions that started at the water's edge and then vanished after about 20 feet. Too big for any waterfowl, too strange for any mammal. When I returned to my cabin, every wall was covered in moisture. Not water, something thicker that left a film when I wiped it away. I sent a sample to the lab in Lansing. They called the next day. "Where did you get this?" the technician asked, voice tense. "Just some condensation." "Why?" "Because it's not water," she said. "It contains cellular material we can't identify, and it's active." I hung up and went straight to the lake. The old-timers who fish here warned me not to go out on the water anymore. Hank Johnson, who's fished Raven Lake for 50 years, grabbed my arm when I was checking his license. "Something big down there now," he said, eyes wide. "Felt it under my boat last week. Created a current so strong it nearly capsized me." I nodded like I didn't believe him, but that afternoon I found the carvings. Half-submerged rocks near the northern shore, where my father's jacket was found. Ancient markings worn by water and time. They showed a shape, something long and serpentine with multiple eyes, surrounded by human figures with their arms raised. The date etched below them, 1872. The year 5 children from the logging camp disappeared while swimming. That's when I knew I wasn't the first to meet what lives in Raven Lake, and I knew I needed to be ready when it decided to fully emerge. Last night, I saw it. I couldn't sleep, so I took my flashlight and walked to the shore. The moon was full, turning the mist silver. The lake was still. Too still, like it was holding its breath. That's when I saw the shadow beneath the surface. Massive. Moving. A darkness blacker than the water around it. At first, I thought it was a trick of light. Then it turned. God help me. It turned and rose slightly, and I saw what looked like scales reflecting moonlight, but not fish scales. These were larger, overlapping like armor plates, and eyes, dozens of eyes blinking independently, glowing with a faint blue light. I stood frozen as it moved closer to shore. The water around it seemed to bend and flow unnaturally, like the creature wasn't just in the water, but was partly made of it. Then it sent up a tendril, not quite solid, not quite liquid, that reached toward the dock where I stood. I backed away, and it retreated beneath the surface. As it disappeared, I heard a sound, a voice calling from the fog. Patricia. My name, in my father's voice. I ran back to my cabin and locked the door, though I knew locks wouldn't matter if it decided to come for me. This morning, I found something that chilled me more than any monster could. Footprints leading from the lake to my cabin window. Human footprints that turned to puddles halfway up the path. It had come to look at me while I slept. Throughout the day, the mist never lifted. It hung over the lake, thicker than I've ever seen it. When I had to walk through it to check on the remaining campers, I felt dizzy, my vision swimming with strange colors. The mist is part of it somehow, an extension of the creature that helps it hunt. Around noon, I saw someone at the far shore, a figure collecting water samples. I called out, thinking it was Pete from the regional office, but when they turned, I saw their face was partly melted, water dripping from exposed bone. They smiled and sank into the lake without a splash. I'm writing this now because I need to record what's happening. The radio isn't working. My phone has no signal. The road out was blocked this morning by a fallen tree that looked more like a thick tentacle until I got close. Then it was just wood and leaves. It's intelligent. It's cutting us off. The Jacksons, the older couple in the RV, left yesterday. The two fishermen are packing up now, spooked by the fish they caught that seemed to change shape in their cooler. That leaves just me. And the thing in the lake. It doesn't just want to kill. I understand that now. The voices, the mimicry. It absorbs its victims somehow, keeps parts of them, their memories, their voices, their faces. My father is in there, has been since 1952, and I think it wants me to join him. The storm came without warning. Black clouds rolled in as the sun set. Lightning, cracking across the sky like glowing veins. The lake churned, waves slamming against the shore with unnatural force. This was no ordinary storm. It was a summoning. I ran to the old boathouse, seeking shelter from the rain that fell like needles against my skin. Inside, something caught my eye, a loose plank in the far wall. When I pried it open, I found a metal box. Inside was my father's field journal, the real one, not the official logs he submitted. September 12, 1952, the final entry read, "It's ancient, not alive as we understand life. It doesn't eat, it collects, experiences, memories, consciousness. The lake isn't its home. The lake is its body. Every drop contains a piece of it. Those it takes become part of it forever." I've seen their faces in the water, heard their voices in the mist. Tomorrow I'll attempt to collect a sample of its core for study. I pray I'm wrong about what happens next. The next page was blank, except for a chemical formula hastily scribbled in the margin. Thunder shook the boathouse. Through the window, I saw the water rising, moving against the rain, forming a wall around the entire shore. The creature wasn't hiding anymore. I grabbed the journal and ran for my cabin, for my emergency supplies. The formula my father had discovered something, some weakness. As a biologist, I understood the compounds he'd listed. Ordinary chemicals, but in a specific combination that might disrupt the creature's molecular structure. I had most of them in my water testing kit. Lightning illuminated the path as I ran. Behind me, something massive rose from the center of the lake. A column of water that bent against the wind, topped with a shapeless mass that glinted with too many eyes. The mist poured from it like a waterfall, washing over the land. Where it touched, the ground sizzled and trees withered. I slammed my cabin door, mixing chemicals with shaking hands. The solution needed to be applied directly to the creature's core, my father's notes said. But where was its core? The cabin walls began to drip. Not rain, something thicker. The boards creaked as something heavy dragged itself onto my porch. A fist pounded on my door. Too liquid, the sound more splash than knock. Patricia. My father's voice, but wrong. Gurgling. "Come see what I've learned. Come join us in the water." He finished the mixture and loaded it into my large field syringe, just as the door burst open, dissolving inward like melting wax. A figure stood there, humanoid but flowing, features constantly shifting between dozens of faces. Some I recognized from old missing persons reports, and center among them my father's. Face formed and reformed, his eyes pleading. Behind this horror, through the broken door, I saw two shapes being dragged toward the lake. The teenagers who must have snuck back to the campground. Their lower bodies were already dissolved, faces frozen in silent screams as they were pulled into the churning water. "You belong with us," said the creature, my father's voice mixing with others. "In the water, forever." It lunged for me. I dodged, feeling droplets of it splash my arm, burning, numbing. I ran past it through the dissolving doorway, heading for the lake. If the entire lake was its body, then the center, where it had risen up, must be its heart, the boat. I needed to reach the boat. My arm throbbed where the droplets had touched. Me, the flesh gray and numb. Behind me, the creature flowed, faster than I could run, a tidal wave of faces and voices and hunger. I reached the small motorboat and shoved it into the water, jumping in as tentacles of lake water reached for my ankles. The motor caught on the third try, and I sped toward the center of the lake, toward the massive pillar of water still rising against all natural law. Lightning showed me glimpses of horrors beneath the surface, bodies in various stages of dissolution, suspended in the depths, faces pressed against an invisible barrier, mouths open in eternal screams. At the center, the water churned like a whirlpool in reverse, rising up. I had one chance. I raised the syringe and gunned the motor, aiming straight for the heart of the phenomenon. "Dad, I'm sorry," I whispered and plunged into the wall of water. Inside was silence, a strange calm. I felt myself beginning to dissolve, my left leg gone to numbness. The faces surrounded me, welcomed me. In the center floated what looked like a giant jellyfish made of glass and light, the core. I plunged the syringe into it and pushed the plunger home. A scream tore through my mind. Thousands of voices in agony. The water convulsed. I was thrown, clear, landing hard in the shallows as the lake seemed to explode behind me. When I woke, the lake was still. Dawnlight showed a normal scene. Water, trees, sky, but the silence was complete. No birds, no insects. Nothing would ever live near this water again. My left leg was gone below the knee, the flesh smoothly sealed as if it had never existed. In its place was something clear that moved when I told it to, that felt like leg but looked like solid water. I left Raven Lake that day, submitted my resignation from the hospital bed, told them there was a chemical spill, a boating accident. They believed me because they wanted to. The lake was quietly removed from public maps the next season. Environmental concerns, the official reason given. I know better. It's not dead, just changed, waiting, growing again. Sometimes at night I feel a tug in my water leg pulling me north, calling me back to Raven Lake. I hear my father's voice in my dreams, and others with him, telling me they're waiting. One day I'll go back. The water always calls its own home eventually. But for now, I leave you this warning. If you ever find a lake too still, with mist that flows against the wind, with water that whispers your name when you get too close, run, and don't look back at whatever rises to follow you. My name is Josephine Nakamura, but everyone calls me Joe. I've worked as a ranger at Crimson Hollow State Park for almost 5 years now. The park sits deep in the Appalachian Mountains where the trees grow so thick they make a roof over your head, and the ground is always covered in those reddish-brown leaves that give the place its name. This morning started like most others. I grabbed my backpack, my grandfather's old wooden walking stick, and headed out to check on Serpentine Creek. The sun was just coming up, sending streaks of light through the trees. It was beautiful, but something felt off. The creek water was weirdly clear. We had heavy rain just 2 days ago, so it should have been murky with mud and leaves. Instead, I could see straight to the bottom, like looking through glass. I wrote it down in my little notebook where I keep track of strange things. I have a bad leg from a climbing accident years ago. That's why I carry Grandpa's stick. He carved it himself from a special tree, and the local old-timers say the wood remembers the old ways. I just know it helps me walk these hills. Before I was a park ranger, I worked for a mining company as a geologist. That ended when there was a big accident. I couldn't stand working for them after that, so I came here instead. My grandfather used to tell me stories about these mountains. He was half Japanese like me, but his mother's family had lived in these parts forever. As I walked along the trail, I noticed a family of deer in a sunny clearing. Normally, deer run away when they see people, but these just stared at me. They didn't even twitch their ears. It was like they didn't care I was there, which is not normal deer behavior at all. The smell of the forest was strong today. Rotting leaves and dirt, but also something else that reminded me of pennies or blood. That metallic smell got stronger near certain rocks, and I made another note. I stopped to check some flowers that shouldn't be blooming yet. They were months early, which is another weird thing happening lately. The sound of Hawkins Falls filled the air with its constant rushing, but then something strange happened. It just stopped. Total silence for maybe 10 seconds, then the noise started again. I've never heard a waterfall just stop like that. My digital thermometer showed crazy readings today. The difference between sunny spots and shady areas was way bigger than normal. Something about the temperature here doesn't follow the usual rules. Lately, I've been having dreams about huge caves filled with red light. In the dreams, I'm walking deeper and deeper underground, following the light. I wake up with my heart pounding. The weird thing is, I've been getting headaches when I research the old mining operations around here. Like my brain doesn't want me to look into it. I've asked headquarters many times to let me map the cave systems better, but they always say no because of budget reasons. I think there's more to it. The other rangers think I'm crazy when I talk about how the caves might all connect underground, forming some kind of hidden ecosystem, but I know there's something down there. I can feel it. My grandfather's journals talk about the caves too. He collected local stories and wrote them all down. Some of them mention the Redwater incidents that happened in 1879, 1934, and 1967. The official explanation was always that minerals from the rocks turned the water red, but Grandpa didn't believe that. Neither do I. As I finished my morning rounds, I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was watching me. Not just the animals, but the trees, the rocks, everything. Like the whole place was awake and aware. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of the strangest and scariest week of my life. The weird stuff started small. First, I found crystals growing in one of the smaller caves that seemed to move. Not while I was looking directly at them, but when I turned away and looked back, they had changed position slightly. I took photos to prove it to myself, and sure enough, comparing the pictures showed they had shifted. Then the animals started acting even stranger. I saw owls flying around at noon. I watched a fox and a rabbit drinking from the same puddle side by side, like they'd forgotten they were supposed to be predator and prey. Something was messing with the natural order. I set up trail cameras near some of the limestone outcroppings where the weird stuff seemed strongest. When I checked the footage, I just got static. Brand new cameras, fresh batteries, but nothing but snow on the screen. Walking along Oak Ridge Trail, I spotted boot prints in the mud. Normal enough, except they started suddenly in the middle of the path, like someone had just appeared there, and then stopped just as suddenly 20 feet later. No other prints coming or going, just appearing and disappearing, like the person had dropped from the sky and then been beamed up. My equipment started failing too. Fully charged batteries would die in seconds, but only near 3 specific cave entrances on the east side of the park. I marked those spots on my map with red circles. Visitors began reporting strange sounds. 3 different hiking groups told me they heard humming coming from inside the rocks. Not echoes, not water dripping, but actual melodies that one man described as beautiful but wrong somehow. I heard it too, standing near Split Rock Cave. A tune that made my skin crawl. The plants near the cave entrances grew at impossible speeds. I measured a fern on Monday that had grown 6 inches by Wednesday. Some of them didn't even look right anymore. Leaves with too many points, stems that twisted in unnatural spirals. But what really scared me was what I found one Thursday morning. A perfect circle of animals. Squirrels, rabbits, and 2 young foxes arranged in a perfect ring in a clearing. They were all alive, but wouldn't move. They just sat there, breathing slowly, eyes open but not seeing. By the time I returned with my camera, they were gone. I collected water samples from Serpentine Creek and looked at them under the microscope in our little ranger station lab. What I saw can't be explained. Tiny organisms with cell structures that shouldn't exist, moving in coordinated patterns. When I tried to preserve them to show the park biologist, they dissolved into nothing. I knew I was on to something big, something dangerous, but no one would believe me without proof. So I decided to explore the main cave system alone. Looking back now, I realized that was exactly what it wanted me to do. I packed my emergency gear, left a note saying I was doing routine checks, and headed to Blackwater Cave, the largest entrance in the park. The air around the opening felt heavy, like before a thunderstorm. My flashlight beam seemed to get swallowed up just a few feet in, not bouncing back like it should. As I stepped inside, the temperature dropped at least 20 degrees. My breath came out in white clouds. The walls around me glistened with moisture that somehow caught the light and broke it into reddish patches. I moved deeper, checking my compass every few steps. It spun wildly, useless. After about 10 minutes of walking, I reached a chamber where the ceiling opened up into darkness my light couldn't penetrate. That's when I saw it. The wall to my right rippled like water, though it was solid stone. The shadows deepened, gathered, and took shape. I froze, unable to move or even scream. What I saw that day in the cave changed everything I thought I knew about our world and what lives in it. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks. The shadow on the wall looked like a massive dog, standing on its hind legs. Then it stepped away from the wall. It was real, 7 feet tall at least, with a body like a man but legs bent backward like a dog's. Its head was a terrifying mix. Mostly wolf with a long snout and pointed ears, but with human-like awareness in its eyes. Those eyes caught my flashlight beam and reflected it back, glowing red like hot coals. I should have run, but my bad leg wouldn't move. The creature tilted its head, studying me. Then it opened its mouth and howled. That sound. I can't describe what it did to my brain. It wasn't just loud, it changed things inside my head. Suddenly, I was back on that mountain. Face falling, my climbing rope snapping, the rocks rushing up to meet me. My worst memory playing out again like I was really there. When the vision cleared, I was on my knees, shaking. The dogman hadn't moved closer. It was watching me, and I got the feeling it was curious. Behind it, I saw movement. 2 more shapes emerged from the darkness, smaller versions of the first. They communicated somehow, not with barks or growls, but with sounds so deep I felt them more than heard them. My teeth vibrated in my head, and the fillings in my back molars ached. I managed to scramble backward, putting a large rock formation between us. As I watched, one of the smaller creatures simply walked through a crack in the wall that was no wider than my hand, like it turned to smoke and slipped through. I ran then, bad leg or not. Somehow, I found my way out, though the tunnel seemed completely different going back. When I reached sunlight, I collapsed, gasping. Over the next few days, I spotted them, everywhere. Not just in caves, but in the forest too. Always at a distance, watching. They controlled the animals somehow. I saw squirrels and birds moving in formation, like scouts. When I checked my trail cameras again, I caught glimpses of the creature's eyes in the background, glowing dots in the darkness. I found marks on trees. Not claw marks, but complex patterns carved with precision. They were marking territory, creating boundaries. The scent around these marks was wrong, like nothing that exists in nature. The dogmen were smart. Park radio communications began failing in patterns that couldn't be coincidence. Power to the ranger station would cut out at specific times. Roads would mysteriously become blocked with fallen trees right when maintenance. Vehicles were scheduled to arrive. I started following them, mapping their movements. They created elaborate paths through the forest that all led toward the cave entrances. It was like they were making trails designed to guide lost hikers underground. But why? What did they want? The answer came when I discovered my grandfather's oldest journal, the one written in Japanese that I'd never fully translated. There, among drawings of cave systems, he wrote about the guardians, creatures half dog, half man that protected something ancient sleeping beneath the mountains. The dogmen weren't predators. They were guards, and that's when I understood what was happening. The recent geological surveys, the vibrations from new construction on the highway 10 miles away. Something had damaged an ancient seal. The guardians were trying to repair it, and they needed materials. Organic materials. People. I finally understood the true danger, but it was already too late. A school bus had just arrived with 35 sixth graders and 4 teachers for their annual ecology field trip. The radio was out. I couldn't warn them. I ran to the visitor center, my bad leg screaming in pain. The school group had already started on the Blue Oak Trail, the exact path I'd mapped as one of the dogmen's herding routes. Sarah Chen, the lead ranger on duty, thought I was having some kind of breakdown when I tried to explain. "Joe, you need to sit down. You're not making sense. Dog monsters? Secret caves?" I didn't have time to convince her. I grabbed emergency flares and my grandfather's walking stick and took off after the school group. The forest felt different now. The silence too complete, the shadows too dark even at midday. I spotted scout animals watching me. Birds that turned their heads in perfect unison. A line of raccoons walking single file across my path. I caught up with the main group. About 2 miles in, Mr. Peterson, the science teacher, waved to me. "Ranger Joe, perfect timing. We were just discussing the limestone formations." "You need to turn around now," I said, trying to sound calm. "There's a safety issue. All of you need to head back to the visitor center immediately." The sky darkened. Suddenly, clouds appearing from nowhere. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in seconds. Mr. Peterson looked concerned. "It wasn't supposed to storm today." "It's not a storm," I said. "Please, get the kids moving. Now." Too late. A howl echoed through the trees, that reality-distorting sound I recognized from the cave. Several kids clapped hands over their ears. 2 began crying. "What was that?" a girl with braids asked. "Wolf," Mr. Peterson said uncertainly. "No," I replied. "Everyone stay together and move toward the road." But as we turned, I saw the path behind us was gone. Where there had been clear trail, there was now impenetrable brush. We were being herded. A count revealed 3 students and 1 teacher, Miss Abernathy, were missing. They must have wandered off before I arrived. "Take this path," I told Mr. Peterson, pointing toward the sun. "Keep going east. Don't stop for anything." "What about the others?" he asked. "I'll find them." I wasn't sure I believed it myself. I tracked the missing group using broken twigs and footprints. They were moving steadily toward the main cave entrance. Being led there. Occasionally, I caught glimpses of dark shapes moving through the trees parallel to the trail. I heard Miss Abernathy before I saw her. "Hello! Is anyone there? We need help." I found them in a small clearing. The forest around them was unnaturally dark, shadows stretching impossibly long for mid-afternoon. Miss Abernathy stood with her arms around 3 terrified kids. They were surrounded by moving shadows. "Joe! Thank God!" Miss Abernathy cried when she saw me. "There's something out there. Something big." "I know," I said, joining their circle. "We need to move now." the shadows congealed, taking solid form. 5 dogmen blocked our exit paths, their eyes glowing, in the artificial darkness they had created. I remembered my grandfather's notes. Sound. They hated certain frequencies. I took out my digital thermometer, which also functioned as a simple frequency generator for testing equipment. I set it to the highest pitch and turned the volume all the way up. The nearest dogman flinched, its form wavering like heat above pavement. "Move," I shouted, pushing the group toward the gap created. "Don't stop." We ran, the kids stumbling, Miss Abernathy half carrying the smallest boy. Behind us, howls turned to snarls of frustration. We'd gone maybe a quarter mile when the forest floor simply opened up beneath us. We fell, sliding down a steep rock chute into darkness. When we hit bottom, we were in a massive underground chamber, dimly lit by a pulsing red glow from deeper tunnels. "Is this the cave system?" Miss Abernathy whispered. "Part of it," I said. "The part they didn't want us to map." The chamber walls were covered in strange markings, ancient symbols that matched those in my grandfather's journal. This was some kind of containment structure built long ago. A deep vibration began beneath our feet. The red glow pulsed faster. "What's happening?" one of the kids asked. "Something's waking up," I replied, suddenly understanding. Something the dogmen were trying to keep asleep. I pulled out my grandfather's journal and compared the wall symbols. They described a doorway, a barrier, and guardians who kept watch. The barrier was failing because recent mining explorations had damaged the ancient structure. The dogmen weren't trying to hurt people. They were trying to repair the barrier before the thing below escaped. They needed living organic material, humans, as components in the seal. A terrible choice lay before me. Miss Abernathy and the children could escape up a side tunnel I spotted leading to daylight, but someone needed to complete the seal. "Take them out that way," I told Missy Abernathy, pointing to the tunnel. "Don't stop until you reach the ranger station." "What about you?" she asked. I held up my grandfather's walking stick. "I have to finish something." After they left, I approached the central column where the red light pulsed strongest. The vibrations grew more intense. Something massive was stirring below. The dogmen appeared around me but made no move to attack. They watched as I examined the broken seal mechanism. A piece was missing. A piece of specific, ancient wood. My grandfather's walking stick. He had been a guardian too, in his way. The stick had been carved from the last tree of its kind, a tree that remembered the old ways. I placed the stick into the gap in the mechanism. It fit perfectly. Red light surged through it, and the vibrations began to slow. A hand, not human, not animal, something else entirely, thrust up through the rock floor, grabbing my injured leg. Pain shot through me as I was pulled downward. The largest dogman stepped forward then, howling a sound that reshaped reality around us. The grabbing hand released me, but I knew the barrier was still incomplete. It needed living organic material. A guardian. I made my choice. I pressed my palm against the ancient wood, and it pulled me in, absorbing me into the mechanism itself. Pain gave way to a strange sense of expansion. I could feel the entire cave system, the forest above, all of it connected. The official report listed 4 casualties. 3 students and 1 ranger lost when an unmarked sinkhole collapsed. The park was closed for geological assessment, but hikers who sneak past the closed signs sometimes report glimpses of a limping figure walking the trails at dusk. She moves alongside shadow-like creatures with glowing eyes, her own eyes reflecting light in the darkness. They say she watches over the forest, protecting those who wander too close to certain caves. They say if you listen carefully near Serpentine Creek, you can sometimes hear her voice on the wind, warning, stay on the path. The barrier must hold. My name is Josephine Nakamura, and I guard what sleeps beneath Crimson Hollow. My name is Walter Harrison. I've been the ranger at Shadow Peak Wilderness for 15 years now. Most people think I'm crazy for staying up here all alone, but the truth is, I like it better this way. After what I saw in Vietnam, the quiet of these mountains is the only thing that keeps my mind right. Tonight, the sunset looks wrong. The sky is blood orange like something's burning far away, but there are no fires reported. I'm standing in my lookout tower, doing my final checks before the night shift starts. The radio keeps crackling with weather warnings about some strange storm coming our way. I've lived through 100 Montana storms, but something about this, one feels different. From up here I can see everything. The beautiful green meadows below, full of wildflowers that should still be open this time of evening, but they're not. They've closed up early, like they're hiding from something. And beyond the meadows is the old forest. Trees so ancient and big that loggers have never touched them. Tonight, that forest looks darker than usual, like it's swallowing up the last bit of daylight. A bull elk calls out somewhere in the valley. Its bugle echoes way too long, bouncing between the mountains again and again. After it finally stops, I notice something odd. Every other animal has gone completely silent. No birds, no insects, nothing. In 15 years, I've never heard these woods so quiet. The smell hits me next. Usually, I love the scent of pine sap and rich soil up here. It's the smell of home. But right now, it's so strong it's making my head hurt. It's like the forest is breathing right in my face. I look up at Shadow Peak itself. Most mountains catch the last light of day, glowing a bit before darkness takes over. Not Shadow Peak. It's like it's eating the light instead, making itself darker than the sky around it. I go back to my logbook and write down something strange. All the sensors in the north part of the park have stopped working at the same time. Could be nothing. Could be bears messing with the equipment again. But my gut tells me it's something else. The wind changes direction 6 times while I'm writing. 6 times in 10 minutes. I check my instruments twice to make sure they're not broken. They're working fine. The wind is just wrong. I notice frost forming on the metal railing of my tower. I check the thermometer. It's dropped 17 degrees in 20 minutes. That's not normal, not even close. There's no weather system that should be causing this. I grab my rifle and my pack. Something's not right in my forest tonight. And whatever it is, it's coming from the North Quadrant. "Come on, Rex," I call to my German Shepherd. He looks at me with worried eyes but follows anyway. He's a good dog. Too good to show how scared he is right now. As we head down the tower steps, I can't shake the feeling that the forest is watching us. And whatever's out there, it's been waiting a long time for tonight. My name is Walter Harrison, and I've got a story nobody believes. I'm 53 years old, though I look older. That's what war does to you. That's what the wilderness does too, if you stay long enough. Most folks notice the scar first. It runs from my right temple all the way down to my left jaw. Got it when our helicopter crashed during an evacuation in Vietnam. I was a mountain warfare specialist back then. Never thought those skills would save my life up here at Shadow Peak. I don't keep photos or anything fancy in my cabin. Just my old copy of Walden by Thoreau and a metal box with my service medals that I never look at. The fewer reminders of the past, the better. That's what I always say. People around here think I know these mountains better than anyone. They're right. I can find my way using just the stars and the moss on trees. Never been lost, not even once. The other rangers respect that, but they worry about me too. Can't blame them. I've asked for the loneliest lookout post 6 seasons in a row. Truth is, I'm not just hiding from people. I'm looking for answers. 7 years ago, my wife Margaret disappeared while hiking in the North Quadrant. Search teams looked for weeks. They found her backpack, her water bottle, but never found her. Never found a body to bury. The nightmares started after that. For years, they were always the same. Back in the jungle, watching friends die. But lately, they've changed. Now, Something's chasing me through an ancient forest. Something tall and hungry that moves like nothing I've ever seen. Most rangers keep simple logs, fire risks, weather patterns, visitor counts. Mine are different. I track everything unusual. Birds flying in strange formations, trees dying for no reason, hikers reporting lost time. The small things nobody else thinks matter. I've been mapping these strange events for years now. They all center around the North Quadrant, the same place Margaret vanished, the same place where hikers sometimes come back different, like they've seen something they can't explain, the same place where my instruments always fail. My bosses think I'm just a grieving husband who can't let go. Maybe they're right, but I know these mountains, and something is wrong up here. Something old, something patient. Rex whines at my feet, breaking my thoughts. He's a good dog, smarter than most people I know. He senses things before I do, always has. I know, boy, I whisper, patting his head. Something's different tonight. I grab my flashlight and check my watch. Almost midnight. The storm warnings keep coming through on the radio, but I know it's not just bad weather coming. I look at the map on my wall, at all the pins marking the strange occurrences. They form a pattern I can't ignore anymore. Time to find out what's really happening in the North Quadrant, I tell Rex, who looks up at me with worried eyes. As we step outside, the cold hits me like a wall. It's summer, but my breath forms clouds in front of my face. The stars above seem dimmer tonight, like something standing between us and their light. Whatever's out there, it knows I'm coming. And maybe deep down, I've always known I'd have to face it someday. My name is Walter Harrison, and I've been tracking something impossible. It started 3 weeks ago. I was checking the trail near Blackwater Creek when I found the footprints. They were huge, 20 inches long with 6 toes. At first, I thought some hikers were playing a joke, making fake Bigfoot prints. But these were deep, pushing, almost, 2 inches into hard mud. Whatever made them was heavy, very heavy. I called Rex to come look, but he wouldn't get near them. That's when I knew something was wrong. Rex isn't afraid of bears or wolves or mountain lions, but he stood there, fur standing up, making a sound I'd never heard before, somewhere between a whine and a growl. "It's okay, boy," I told him, but we both knew it wasn't. I took pictures and made plaster casts of the prints. Standard procedure, but I didn't report them. Not yet. I needed more evidence first. The next day, I tried to follow the tracks, but they disappeared into the North Quadrant. Rex flat out refused to go in. He's never done that before. I had to tie him up at the trail marker while I went ahead. My compass went crazy as soon as I crossed into the north section. The needle just spun and spun, then pointed west toward the mountain. But west isn't where north should be. I checked. My backup compass. Same thing. I kept going anyway, using the sun to navigate. About 2 miles in, I found something that made me stop in my tracks. A cluster of massive pine trees. Trees that must have been at least 200 years old. All uprooted, not broken by wind or lightning. Uprooted, with their root systems fully intact, like something had just pulled them out of the ground, and they weren't scattered randomly. They formed a perfect circle, with all the trunks pointing toward the center like spokes on a wheel. No, storm does that. Nothing natural does that. I stood there a long time, just staring. In the center of the circle was a stone cairn, stacked rocks. But these weren't small hiking markers. These were massive boulders, hundreds of pounds each, stacked, 7 high. It would take machinery to move them, but there were no vehicle tracks anywhere. That night, I set up wildlife cameras around the edge of the North Quadrant. When I checked them the next day, most showed nothing but static during the night hours. But one camera, the one facing directly north, had captured a single frame. The image still haunts me. It showed what looked like shadows moving between the trees. But they were all wrong. Too tall, too thin, stretching up at least 12 feet. And they weren't cast on the ground like normal shadows. They seemed to be moving on their own, like they were alive. I took the memory card, but left the cameras running. Back at my cabin, I played the audio from the camera's microphone. For hours, nothing. Then, at exactly 3:17 a.m., a sound came through that made my blood freeze. A deep, rhythmic vocalization, like nothing I've ever heard before. Not animal, not human. Something else. I sent a copy to a friend who studies animal sounds at the university. He called me the next day, his voice shaking. "Walter," he said, "whatever made this sound isn't in any of our databases, and according to our analysis, it's physically impossible for a human to make these vocalizations. The chest cavity would have to be 3 times larger than normal." Over the next few days, hikers started reporting strange things. Lost time, entering the woods in the morning and emerging at night with only an hour registered on their watches. Disorientation, even. On trails they'd walked dozens of times. And most disturbing of all, 2 separate groups claimed they'd seen me in 2 different locations simultaneously. They described my clothes perfectly, said I'd given them directions. But I was nowhere near those trails on those days. Local indigenous people have always avoided the North Quadrant. I finally asked an elder why. He just shook his head and said, "That's where those who walked before still walk." When I pressed him for more information, he told me to look for signs of the Wendigo, creatures of hunger and winter that were once human but had transformed into something monstrous. I've never been superstitious, but as I sit here in my cabin, listening to that recording again, watching the temperature drop for no reason, seeing frost form on my windows in the middle of summer, I'm starting to believe. Rex won't stop pacing and whining. He knows something's coming. And so do I. My name is Walter Harrison, and I'm getting closer to the truth. I've spent the last week exploring deeper into the North Quadrant, mapping everything unusual. The strange happenings aren't random. They form a pattern. Like ripples in a pond, they spread out from somewhere deep in the oldest part of the forest. Yesterday, I found something that turned my blood cold. A deer carcass, but wrong in every way. Its eyes, it had 4 of them. 2 in the normal spots, 2 more growing from its neck. Its jaw was twisted to the side with teeth that looked almost human. I've seen animals killed by every predator in these mountains. This wasn't eaten. It was changed, like something had twisted its body while it was still alive. I took samples and photographs, though I don't know who I could show them to who wouldn't think I've gone completely mad. 3 miles further in, I found a clearing filled with more animal remains. Rabbits with misaligned jaws, birds with wings, growing from their bellies, all arranged in neat rows like a child's collection. But no child did this. The temperature keeps dropping the deeper I go. In some spots, my water bottle freezes solid even though it's summer. The trees grow thicker here, twisted into shapes that make no sense. Some bend completely sideways before growing up again, forming perfect right angles. Nature doesn't work. That way, I've started finding strange markings carved into trees and rocks, symbols I don't recognize. Not from any language I know. They remind me of antlers or reaching hands. They seem to point deeper into the woods. Last night I camped on the edge of the quadrant. I couldn't sleep. The forest was too quiet. No insects, no night birds, nothing. Around midnight I heard what sounded like footsteps circling my tent. Heavy footsteps that made the ground shake slightly, but every time I looked outside, nothing was there. Just before dawn, I dozed off, dreamed of Margaret. She was standing at the edge of the trees, her back to me, looking up at something tall, something with too many limbs. She turned to face me, but her face wasn't right. Her eyes were too big, too black. "They've been here all along, Walter," she said in my dream. They were waiting for us to notice them. I woke up drenched in sweat, with frost covering the outside of my tent even though the sun was rising. When I returned to my cabin today, there was a message from the main ranger, Station 4 backpackers are missing in the North Quadrant. They were supposed to check in 3 days ago. A search and rescue operation is being organized for tomorrow morning. I tried to warn them, told them we should close the North Quadrant until we understand what's happening. They think I'm paranoid, still broken from losing Margaret. Maybe I am. But I know what I've seen. In my 15 years here, I've learned one thing. The mountains keep secrets. And some secrets don't want to be found. While waiting for the rescue team, I've been researching Wendigo lore. The stories are consistent across different tribes. They were once human but transformed after committing terrible acts, usually cannibalism. They're cursed with endless hunger. They bring winter with them, freezing everything they touch. They can mimic human voices, lure people deeper into the wilderness. The most disturbing part? They're intelligent. They study their prey, learn from them, and they collect trophies. I can't stop thinking about the missing hikers from last season, who were never found, or the search party 3 years ago that came back with no memory of where they'd been for 2 missing days, or Margaret, whose backpack was found with the zipper frozen shut in the middle of July. The rescue team arrives at dawn. 5 rangers, good people who think they're looking for lost hikers. They don't know what's really out there. I've packed herbs the tribal elder recommended, sweetgrass and sage bundles. He said they might offer some protection. I've got flares, extra weapons, my radio, but deep down, I know we're not prepared for what waits in the North Quadrant. As I write this, frost is forming on my cabin windows from the inside. The temperature is dropping fast. Rex won't stop barking at the tree line. They're coming closer, the ancient ones of Shadow Peak, and I think they know I've been watching them. My name is Walter Harrison, and I've seen them. The rescue team arrived. At dawn, 5 rangers with good intentions but no idea what they were walking into. I tried one last time to convince them to stay away from the North Quadrant. I showed them my evidence, the footprints, the photos, the deformed animals. They looked at me with pity in their eyes. Old Walter, driven mad by grief. "We've got 4 missing hikers, Walt," said Mike, the team leader. "We're going in whether you join us or not." So I went with them. I couldn't let them go alone. I brought Rex, too, though he fought me every step of the way. Poor dog knew better than all of us. 2 hours in, our radios started failing. The static grew louder the deeper we went. The forest changed around us, the trees growing taller, older, with branches that seemed to reach down toward us. The ground became spongy, giving slightly with each step like it was breathing. We found the first sign of the missing hikers at noon. A single boot stuck in frozen mud. Frozen solid, even though the temperature was nearly 70 degrees everywhere, else in the park. Mike tried to radio it in but got nothing but static. Then came the storm. It wasn't on any forecast, but black clouds rolled in within minutes. Lightning flashed, but there was no thunder, just eerie silence between each blinding flash. And in those flashes, I saw them for the first time. They stood between the trees, impossibly tall and thin. In that first glimpse, I thought they were just oddly shaped trees. But then one moved. Its head nearly touched the lower branches 15 feet up. Its arms hung down almost to the ground, ending in long, spindly fingers. "Get down!" I shouted to the others, but my voice seemed swallowed by the forest. The air felt thick, like we were underwater. Another flash. They were closer now. I could make out their features, or lack of them. Their bodies were emaciated, skin stretched tight over elongated bones. Their heads weren't human. They were deer skulls, complete with massive antlers that branched out like winter trees. But the eyes were human. Too human. Full of hunger and ancient intelligence. The temperature plummeted. Our breath clouded in front of us. Frost spread across the ground toward us like reaching fingers. "What the hell are those things?" whispered Lisa, one of the younger rangers. Before I could answer, a sound hit us. Not something we heard with our ears, but something we felt in our bones. A deep vibration that made my vision blur and my stomach turn. Rex whimpered and pressed against my legs. The others felt it too. Mike dropped to his knees, hands over his ears, though the sound wasn't something you could block. I recognized it from my recordings. The same impossible vocalization, but 100 times stronger. "The Wendigos," I said, my voice shaking. "We need to go. Now." But it was too late. They were all around us, moving between the trees like smoke. Their movements all wrong. Joints bending backward, bodies stretching and contracting. They moved with terrible purpose, herding us deeper into the forest. I pulled out the sweetgrass and sage, lighting it like the elder had shown me. The creatures hesitated, keeping their distance from the smoke. It wasn't much, but it gave us a moment to think. "There's a ridge 1/2 mile east," I told the others. "If we can reach higher ground, maybe we can get radio contact." We ran. Or we tried to. The forest worked against us, roots rising up to trip us, branches reaching down to grab at our clothes. And all around us those figures moved, always just at the edge of vision, always closing in. Mike went down first. One moment he was running beside me, the next he was gone. We heard his scream cut off abruptly, then Lisa, then the others, until only I remained, with Rex growling at my side. I climbed a tree to get my bearings. What I saw from up there will haunt me forever. The entire forest floor was moving with those creatures, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all converging on our location. And in the center of them all, a larger figure, a massive Wendigo twice the size of the others, its antlers so large and branching they looked like a crown. Below it, hanging from a massive pine, were objects that caught the dim light. Human belongings, watches, backpacks, ranger badges, trophies. Something caught my eye, a flash of familiar green fabric, Margaret's hiking jacket, preserved somehow, hanging among the other items. My heart stopped. After 7 years, I finally knew what happened to her. The massive Wendigo looked up. Its hollow eye socket somehow found mine. It knew I was watching. It wanted me to see. And then it smiled. A human smile on a deer skull face. An impossible, terrible smile that spoke of intelligence and malice older than human memory. I scrambled down the tree. Rex and I ran blindly, no longer caring about direction, just trying to put distance between us and them. The herbs were gone. We had nothing left. Night was falling. In the growing darkness, their forms seemed more solid, more real. They moved faster, more confidently. This was their time. We found a small cave as the last light faded. Rex and I huddled inside, listening to them move outside, their strange clicking and hissing communications. They knew where we were. They were just waiting. As I sit here writing this by the dim light of my last flare, I can see their elongated shadows moving across the cave entrance. The temperature keeps dropping. My pen is freezing in my hand. They're not just animals. They're not just monsters. They're ancient intelligence. They've been in these mountains since before humans came, and they'll be here long after we're gone. Don't think I'll make it out of this forest, but I need to warn anyone who finds this. Stay away from Shadow Peak. Stay away from the North Quadrant. The Ancient Ones are waking up, and they're hungry. My name is Walter Harrison, and this is my final report. Dawn broke cold and gray. Rex and I spent the night in that tiny cave, listening to them circling outside. I dozed off sometime before sunrise and dreamed of Margaret, again. This time she was standing at the mouth of the cave, her face normal, her eyes sad. "You need to find the others, Walter," she said. "They're still alive, for now." I woke with a start. The Wendigos were gone, but the forest was silent in that unnatural way that told me they were still nearby. Rex whined softly, pressing against my side. "We need to find the rescue team," I told him, though I had little hope they were still alive. We moved cautiously through the woods. The trees seemed to watch us, branches turning slightly to track our movement. The air was so cold it hurt to breathe. Everything was covered in a thin layer of frost, creating a bizarre winter landscape in the middle of summer. I found the first survivor about a mile from our cave. Carlos, the youngest ranger, huddled in the hollow of a massive tree. He was shaking uncontrollably, his eyes wide and unfocused. "They took the others," he whispered when I touched his shoulder. "Carried them away, but they left me. Why did they leave me?" I helped him to his feet. His skin was ice cold, but he was alive. 1 out of 5. Better than I'd hoped for. As we made our way carefully back toward the boundary of the North Quadrant, Carlos told me what he'd seen. The creatures had attacked so fast there was no time to react. They'd grabbed Mike and 2 others, dragging them deeper into the forest. Lisa had run, and Carlos had hidden. He'd watched as one of the Wendigos found her, mimicking my voice perfectly, to lure her out of hiding. "It looked like you, Walt," he said, his voice breaking. "It had your face for a moment. Then it changed back. A mile from what I hoped was the edge of their territory, we found Lisa. She was huddled behind a rock formation, clutching her radio like a lifeline, though it emitted nothing but static. Her hair had turned completely white. She didn't speak, didn't acknowledge us, just stared straight ahead. "We need to keep moving," I told Carlos. "They'll come back after dark." But as the sun began to set, I realized we weren't going to make it out before nightfall. We found a clearing, and I built a fire, surrounding it with a circle of the remaining herbs. Lisa hadn't spoken a word, and Carlos wasn't much better. "Why are they doing this?" he asked as darkness fell. "They're territorial," I explained, telling him everything I'd learned. "They've been here longer than us, much longer, and they see us as invaders, or maybe just as food." As full dark descended, the temperature plummeted again. The fire seemed to shrink, giving less light and heat than it should. Beyond our small circle of firelight, shadows moved. Tall, thin shadows that seemed to flow like water between the trees. Rex's growl was the only warning we got. A massive shadow detached itself from the darkness. The Alpha Wendigo, its antlers scraping against the lower branches of the surrounding pines. It stood at the edge of our firelight, watching us with those 2 human eyes in its skull face. Behind it, other figures emerged. Smaller Wendigos, dozens of them, forming a circle around our camp. They made no move to attack, held back by the firelight and herbs. The Alpha Wendigo raised one impossibly long arm and pointed deeper into the forest. The message was clear. "Follow or die. We're not going anywhere with you," I said, knowing it. "Understood me?" It tilted its head, the massive antlers shifting. Then it made a sound, a series of clicks and hisses that somehow formed words. "Walter Harrison," it said, my name distorted but recognizable. My blood froze. It knew me. It had been watching me just as I'd been watching it. It gestured again, and 2 smaller Wendigos dragged something forward. Mike and another ranger, bound somehow with ice that grew from their own clothes. They were alive, but barely conscious. "Your choice," the Alpha Wendigo hissed. "Follow or watch." I understood then. It was offering a trade. Me for the others. It wanted me, specifically. Had been watching me for years, learning from me, studying me. Maybe even since Margaret disappeared. I made my decision then. I would go with them, learn what I could, and if possible, destroy them from within. These creatures had taken everything from me. It was time to end this. I gave Carlos my pack with my notes and findings. "Get this to someone who will believe. You," I told him. "Close the North Quadrant, permanently." "What are you doing, Walt?" he asked, eyes wide with fear. "Saving your lives," I replied. I turned to the Alpha Wendigo. "I'll come. Let them go." It made that terrible smile again and nodded once. The smaller Wendigos released Mike and the other ranger. shoving them toward our fire circle. I stepped toward the Alpha Wendigo, feeling the cold intensify with each step away from the fire. Rex followed, hackles raised but loyal to the end. As soon as I crossed the line of firelight, they surrounded me. Cold hands gripped my arms, their touch burning like dry ice against my skin. The Alpha Wendigo leaned down, its face inches from mine, that human smile still stretched across its skull face. "Margaret," it hissed. "Remember." It raised a clawed hand, something dangling from it. Margaret's ranger badge, preserved somehow after all these years. My worst fears confirmed, at last. They began to drag me deeper into the forest. I looked back once to see Carlos helping the others toward what I hoped was safety. At least they would survive to warn others. The Wendigos moved at impossible speed, half carrying me between them. Rex ran alongside, snarling at any that came too close. My loyal friend, following me even into this nightmare. They took me to a clearing unlike any I'd seen before, a perfect circle where nothing grew, surrounded by those impossibly stacked boulders. In the center was a black pool that seemed to have no bottom, its surface reflecting nothing, not even the stars above. The Alpha Wendigo dragged me to the edge of this pool. The others formed a circle around us, swaying and making those clicking, sounds that might have been language or might have been laughter. I knew then what they intended. This was their source, their origin, the thing that had transformed them from whatever they had once been into these monsters. And they wanted me to join them. With the last of my strength, I pulled the flare gun from my belt, the one weapon they hadn't taken from me. I fired it not at them, but at the massive dead tree that hung over the dark pool. The tree that was festooned with their trophies, decades, perhaps centuries of items taken from their victims. The flare hit, and the tree went up like it had been soaked in gasoline. The Wendigos screamed, a sound so terrible it seemed to tear at the fabric of reality itself. They rushed toward the burning tree, trying to save their precious collection. In the chaos, I ran. I ran as I've never run before, Rex at my heels. Behind us, the Wendigos' screams turned to roars of rage. The forest itself seemed to come alive with their fury. Trees bending, roots rising to trip me, branches reaching down like hands. I didn't look back. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out. Somehow, against all odds, we reached the boundary of the North Quadrant just as dawn broke. Carlos and the others had made it out. They'd radioed for help, and a helicopter was already searching for us. When they found me, I was barely conscious, my body temperature dangerously low. The official report lists Mike and the other two rangers as missing, presumed dead. It mentions nothing about Wendigos or ancient entities or a dark pool in a perfect clearing. No one believed Carlos's fragmented account or Lisa's silence. They didn't believe me either, though they're too polite to say it to my face. Post-traumatic stress, they whisper. Hypothermia-induced hallucinations. Grief finally breaking an old man's mind. I've been removed from active duty, pending psychological evaluation. They've closed the North Quadrant temporarily, citing environmental concerns. It's not enough, but it's something. As I sit here in my hospital bed, looking out at Shadow Peak in the distance, I know it's not over. They're still out there, watching, waiting. And now they know me as well as I know them. The doctors are concerned about my body temperature. It won't return to normal. My skin stays cold to the touch. And sometimes when I look in the mirror, I see something in my eyes that wasn't there before. Something old. Something hungry. Rex won't come near me anymore. A week after I returned, the surveillance aircraft doing thermal imaging of the North Quadrant captured something unusual. A human-shaped heat signature moving with a pack of unidentifiable, cold signatures, moving faster than any human should be able to move. The technicians dismissed it as equipment malfunction. But I know better. I know what's happening to me. The Wendigos didn't just let me go. They changed me, marked me somehow, and soon I'll have no choice but to return to them. If you're reading this, heed my warning. Stay away from Shadow Peak. Stay away from the North Quadrant. The Ancient Ones have been there since before we had names for them, and they'll be there, long after we're gone. My name is Walter Harrison, and I'm afraid I won't be Walter Harrison much longer.